Chapter 3690. Arbor shook his head and didn't beat around the bush with them, saying directly, I said that when I become a saint-level alchemist, I can definitely save her. But before that, as long as she eats the longevity fruit, her body will definitely be fine. It's fine even if her body doesn't deteriorate for 10 years. Longevity fruit. Mo Luxing and Bai Xing exclaimed one after the other. N. Arbor nodded. Can we wait for 2 months? Just now, the old man said that Imperial Mother's body wouldn't last until the end of the year. They could definitely wait until the 8th of the 8th month. Logically speaking, the longevity fruit would take 3 months to bear fruit. Arbor was already urging Little Water and Little Earth to speed up the planting of this fruit. 2 months couldn't be faster. Even if the fruit ripened, the effect would be greatly reduced. Mo Liuxing's eyes couldn't help but misted. He grabbed Arbor's hand and nodded. Okay, Imperial Father believes in you. You can definitely help your Imperial Mother get through this difficult time. Arbor nodded, but his little paw was suddenly pulled back by Mo Lian. Mo Luxing glanced at his son and pretended to be serious. Alright, it's getting late. Go back and have a good rest. Old Master Bai opened his mouth and watched the young couple walk out of the door. Do you think the longevity fruit that the little girl spoke of is reliable? The old master looked at his son-in-law with a dignified expression. He was embarrassed to yell at the young couple, so he didn't pay much attention to his son-in-law. He would say whatever he wanted. Mo Luxing nodded. According to my understanding of the little girl in this period of time. This little girl usually doesn't boast. If she says the longevity fruit is feasible, then it's definitely feasible. Old Master Bai nodded. Alright. He also hoped that this granddaughter-in-law really had the longevity fruit in her hands, and not deliberately used it to deceive them in order to deal with that Shawnee Sioux. Mo Luxing glanced at the old master and coughed lightly. Don't worry, according to my understanding of this little girl, she won't easily promise something she isn't sure of. Looks like you have a high opinion of her. Old Master Bai looked deeply at his son-in-law. In the future, Old Master will have more contact with the little girl. Naturally, he will know. If Old Master insists on going down the path of death, even your son-in-law won't be able to help you. Mo Luxing secretly face-bombed. He knew very well that his son had already been instigated by his daughter-in-law and was completely useless. Between his wife and his grandfather, that guy would definitely stand by his wife's side. Humph! Elder Bai angrily raised his hand and patted the dust off his body. Just now, he had been forced into a fluster by that little girl's talismans. Now that he thought about it, it was really fucking embarrassing. This girl is not only an alchemist, but also a great talisman master. Now that he thought about it, he still felt a little shocked. Mo Luxing nodded. Yes. His talent is not bad. The old man curled his lips, flicked his sleeves, and walked out of the door. In the end, she said in an indignant voice, it's just that her temper is too bad. Mo Luxing, didn't you also not say anything when you came up and directly made a move to protect that Shawnee Sioux? Don't say who has a bad temper. Aren't we all straightforward and lousy? Ha! Achoo! Lord Jojo reached out to rub his little nose and looked back at the deep night. Someone must be talking bad about me. Chapter 3691. How could that be? Mo Lian hugged his wifey in amusement and rubbed her small face. I'll beat up whoever dares to speak ill of my wifey. Sir Jojo blinked. What if it's your grandfather talking about me? Mo Lian chuckled and said without hesitation, beat him up then. Let him cause a ruckus in there. He doesn't know how good Jojo is. The little fellow pursed her lips and said seriously with a taut face, your grandfather must be talking about me right now. He has a terrible temper. How could that be? Mo Lien couldn't resist laughing and tucked a strand of her hair behind her head. He then cupped her small face and looked at her intently. My Jojo's temper isn't bad. The little fellow nodded and said in full agreement, you're right. I'm usually too lazy to argue with people and don't want to get angry. That Shawnee Sue was truly too much. If she didn't kill her and allowed her to annoy her every day, how could that be okay? Moreover, this already proved that Shawnee Sue was a person of destiny, so she deserved to die, all right? Lien. The little fellow squeezed toward him and hugged his waist. She asked softly, now that we have time, you should honestly confess yesterday's matter. I'll confess everything. Prince Mo nodded repeatedly and sold out Duanyu without any integrity. Hey, it was Duanyu who sent me a message. That Rongli from Tsangzhou has a hole in his head. He actually brought people to capture you. Originally, this matter was vexing enough. Who knows how many people were hoping for our wedding to go awry. Prince Mo huffed, so I contacted Duanyu in advance. He who strikes first gains the advantage. When Prince Mo said this, he truly didn't feel that he was too ruthless. Thinking about it now, he still felt some lingering fear. If Rongli really spread the news that Jojo had a portable spirit domain, the trouble in the future would be even greater. Arbor's big bright eyes stared straight at the man beside him. So you set up a trap and let Rongli walk right into it. Arbor couldn't help but blink curiously. Duanyu's message was vague, so how did Rongli know that I carried the spirit domain with me? Do you still remember Chen Baojia who escaped? Chen Baojia went to Tsangzhou. Chen Baojia was kidnapped by Ba Shu from the academy. Arbor was enlightened. No wonder I couldn't find this woman. The Chen family still insisted that I was the one who hid her. It's really strange. Chen Baojia reported me to Rongli, and Rongli came to arrest me. Arbor understood the course of events and said with a nod, so you and Duanyu attacked him first. But he looked perfectly fine when he attended the banquet just now. Mo Lien smiled faintly. The little guy suddenly opened his mouth wide with a look of realization on his face. I know. The Rongli we saw at night, Mo Lien gently covered her mouth. All right. It's already very late tonight, so let's rest early. I'll take you somewhere early tomorrow morning. After the carriage arrived at the Eastern Palace, Missouri Lien carried the little fellow down and strode into the bedchamber. When Sir Jojo saw the door to the bedchamber, his entire body went limp for no reason, and he couldn't resist exclaiming, "What are you doing?" Chapter 3692. The little fellow reached out and wrapped her arms around her neck. Her expression was slightly unnatural, and she instantly wanted to change the topic. So you're saying that you and Duanyu planned this beforehand? What do you mean by premeditated? You make it sound like we're bad guys. Mo Lien frowned in dissatisfaction. This is called strategizing. Victory is decided from 1,000 miles away. If it weren't for the fact that he had to resolve Rong-Li's matter as soon as possible and that there were several people who secretly wished for nothing more than his misfortune, how could he have rushed to Heaven Saint Palace so late and caused his Jojo to suffer a bit of grievance? Don't think he couldn't find out which families were the culprits. Humph, when he settled down and freed himself, these people shouldn't even think about having an easy time in the future. Hubby, put me down. The little stoic said seriously, I made an appointment with Rotten Peach Blossom today to enter seclusion in Paradise Planet for a while. Mo Lien's eyes instantly narrowed dangerously as he looked down at his wifey. One moment it's Duanyu, the next it's Rotten Peach Blossom. Wifey, you've been calling out another man's name today. Sir Jojo looked at her husband in bewilderment and closed her eyes, pretending to faint. Dizzy, hubby, I'm going to sleep. Ha! Hubby's laughter was a bit scary. What to do? It's fine, you sleep. Wifey, I'll carry you to take a bath first. The little fellow's face instantly turned bitter, and the word embarrassed was written all over her face. Hubby, it hurts. Mo Lien retracted his hand and cupped her small face. He looked at her seriously and said, it's right that it hurts. Because our movements last night weren't very standard, this kind of situation requires more practice in order to make long-term progress. We'll slowly torment each other for a while, and we'll definitely be able to enter the realm of being one with the heavens. Why did he make it sound like they were practicing martial arts? What kind of fallacious reasoning was this? Hubby always had a bellyful of bizarre reasoning, so how could she break it? This time, the little stoic also couldn't keep up the act and opened her eyes. Under the moonlight, those eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of mist. The dense moisture caused Mo Lien's heart to ripple endlessly. His fingers couldn't help but caress her small face, gently caressing it. It was so soft that it seemed like it could overflow with water. His gaze was glued to hers, as if they were going to be entangled for a long time. At this moment, their breaths were intertwined, and the heat from their bodies seemed to follow the air, completely evaporating and dispersing. The stars were shining brightly tonight. This feeling, this scene, and this heart, lingered and melted into one. Jojo. He gently planted a kiss on her forehead and said in a low and hoarse voice, remember to block that star field. Reaching out, Mo Lien lifted the bead curtain that was constantly colliding under the starlight, and quickly carried her into the pool. Along with the sound of water that was neither fast nor slow, a soft moan that was mixed with heavy breathing blended into the night. The next morning, Mr. Jojo struggled to get out of bed with a sullen expression on his face. He was picked up by a refreshed man beside him. Jojo. Prince Mo rubbed against her face and said with a grin, today's weather is really good. Look, the sun came out so early. Hubby will take you to a good place to stroll around. I guarantee you'll like it. Where are we going? The little fellow pulled a long face and glared at him in a huff. Hiking in the suburbs. The man stretched out his head and pecked her on the cheek. Chapter 3693. Although that guy had carried her away to soak her in a medicinal bath, she hadn't even moved her pinky. That guy had served her the entire time. However, Sir Jojo, who was slumped in the carriage, still felt sore all over. Every part of his body didn't belong to him. Get lost. When the little fellow saw him approach, she immediately narrowed her eyes vigilantly and swept a disdainful gaze at him. Mo Lien blinked and inched closer to her. He happily hugged his wifey as he shook his head repeatedly and said, I'll roll. I'll roll to your side, roll here and there, roll here and there. I won't go anywhere else. Arbor couldn't help but want to laugh. She secretly suppressed the urge to laugh and maintained her stoic expression as she snorted. Mo Lien pulled her little hand over with a grin and kissed it hard on the lips. Jojo, hubby hasn't seen you for a month. Don't you miss me? She did before, but seeing how noisy this person was now, she didn't miss him at all. Hubby missed you so much. I even brought you many, many gifts that you'll like. The little fellow didn't even bother to bat her eyelids. She leaned against the thick carpet and stared at him with her dark eyes. Prince Mo was overjoyed and simply reached out to carry this little one onto his lap. Without waiting for her to roll her eyes in protest, he swiped his hand and took out a black lingji mushroom of excellent quality from his inner world. The little girl instantly forgot to struggle. Her large eyes sparkled as she stared at the lingji mushroom. Her little hand involuntarily touched it. I found this in the underground valley after the array disc in Grey Ping village collapsed. Mo Lien hugged her and tilted his head to rub against her neck. Isn't it very good? It should be a god-rank medicinal ingredient. The little girl nodded vigorously. It was a god-rank medicinal ingredient, and the quality was quite good. It was really very good. This kind of black lingji mushroom could also be planted in Paradise Planet's 100 herb garden in the past, and it could also propagate very well. However, it had a better place to go now. In Forest Planet, with the blessing of time, this black lingji mushroom should be able to grow into a patch in no time. A hint of joy appeared on the little girl's face. Mo Lien was so good at reading people's body language. Noticing that his wife was happy, he immediately took advantage of the situation and turned the little fellow's small face to face him with a serious expression. "Jojo, return the favor." The little fellow stared blankly for a moment, his eyes wide open as he stared at him. Crown Prince Mo instantly revealed a pitiful, "My heart hurts so much, my heart is broken, I can't take it anymore, Chow Chow, you've hurt me" expression. He clutched his chest and cried out in agony, Chow Chow, you're bad. In the past, whenever you gave me a gift, I would consciously give you a gift in return. Now that it's my turn to give you a gift, why aren't you giving me a gift in return? Really? Sir Jojo had a confused look on his face. What gift in return? Why do I feel like I've been trapped by this two-faced guy? You don't remember? The little fellow looked at him accusingly, making Jojo feel a little uneasy. It's not that I don't remember, the little fellow said stubbornly. Then return the favor. Mo Lien winked at him. Oh. Arbor was thinking hard about how to return the favor when Mo Lien suddenly hugged him and pressed him against her. You really forgot. Bad guy, then your husband will come and get it himself. Mo Lien muttered, his phoenix eyes shining. Chapter 3694. Arbor was taken aback. Just as his lips were about to touch hers, she finally remembered this fellow's so-called return gift seemed to be an indecent kiss. When she was still a child, this fellow used this method to trick her into thinking that she was young and ignorant. God knows how many kisses he had cheated from her. Sir Jojo wanted to push his face away, but her small hand was immediately wrapped in his palm. Jojo, I still have a gift for you. This fellow was so mean he took out one gift after another, then asked for a return gift. Arbor didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at the pile of herbs by his legs. Along the way, the two of them spent their time returning gifts back and forth. When they were about to reach the villa in the suburbs, Arbor threw the herbs into Forest Planet and let Little Two be responsible for planting them. Afterward, she hammered this indecent fellow and grumpily said, "Let me ask you something. You just said that there's a formation disk under Greyfield Village. A talisman array. It's a talisman array." Mo Lien thought of the Holy Stone's location, and her phoenix eyes narrowed. I suspect that there's a holy vein in the valley I fell into. I plan to ask Huifeng to bring a bunch of brats from the Purple Forest Guard to dig there in 2 days. She originally wanted to send Huifeng to Mount Heaven Saint to mine, but now it seemed that Greyfield Village was the best place. In any case, the remaining zombies there had all been wiped out by them. Even if there were a few that slipped through the net, they wouldn't be a problem at all. Now that the problem of safety was resolved, the matter of the holy vein had to be settled as soon as possible. Knowing that there was such a large holy vein but not touching it didn't fit Mo Lien's personality. Our dear Huifeng, who was far away in Greyfield Village, couldn't help but sneeze and look up at the sky in confusion. Holy vein. It sounded a bit familiar. Sir Jojo blinked. You mean that you found a holy vein in the talisman array under Greyfield Village? Mo Lien nodded. Yes. I reckon that the holy vein is quite large. So the branch of the ball that was left by your side absorbed a large amount of holy stone, right? Mo Lien was stunned. She lowered her head and looked at Jojo from head to toe. Did it affect you? Arbor shook his head. It affected Little Tree. He went into seclusion and hasn't woken up yet. Oh. Mo Lien nodded. Then it shouldn't be a problem. After I shattered the formation disc in Grey Plain Village, I came out and met up with Wei Feng and the others. After that, in order to save time, Little Seven and I returned to Dragonflame City. However, we encountered a lot of resistance along the way. Mo Lien's eyes narrowed slightly. The Qin estate is adding fuel to the fire, as well as the Long and Gu families. I'm a little surprised that the Lin family's patriarch from Rong City is also involved in this matter. The Lin family wants to develop in Dragonflame City, Arbor said coldly. This will depend on whether the lives of his disciples are tough enough. Mo Lien curled her lips mockingly and continued, we were ambushed by a large group of people on the 10-mile slope. In order to replenish my holy power, I took out the holy stones. Ball's Vine, thinking of that scene, Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. That thing was like a mouse that had fallen into a rice bowl. When it saw the holy stones, it desperately crawled over and stuck to them. In the end, it absorbed less than 3 holy stones on its own. The remaining dozens of holy stones all went into the vine's stomach. It made everyone speechless. Chapter 3695. This really is a sentient tree, Mo Lien ridiculed. It only has a vine branch, yet it knows how to snatch food from others. Arbor's eyes curved. Lien, while you were at Graping Village, I also did a lot of things. The little fellow was in the mood to talk for once. She recounted to Mo Lien everything that happened in the Mu family's Chaoyang pavilion without stopping. Then she blinked and said to him, I think that the sacred vein you found in Graping Village should have been left to me by Patriarch Chaoyang. Didn't you say that there were layers of talisman arrays left behind by a heaven-level talisman master outside? It should have been done by Patriarch Chaoyang. Mo Lien thought carefully and couldn't help but nod with a smile. It really is very possible. Then do you want to go? Mo Lien rubbed his wife's head. If you want to go, let's go together. Arbor pondered for a few seconds and made a sound of agreement. She nodded. Of course I have to go. But I heard that the Academy's Tianyuan ranking is about to open. I want to find time to go back to the sect. Eldest senior sister has been awake for a few days. I should send her back first and reunite with second martial uncle and the others. The carriage suddenly shook and a cry of surprise came from outside. They had already reached the south of the city and the carriage was heading towards the capital's suburbs. The carriage abruptly came to a stop after a sudden movement. Mo Lien grasped the little fellow's hand and hugged her. Her voice faintly traveled out through the curtain. What is it? Arbor pursed her lips. This guy was one face in front of others and another in front of her. He was especially good at bewitching people. For example, he took off his clothes and turned into a beast. Put on clothes. He was well dressed, but he couldn't change the nature of a bad guy, reporting to your highness, the road ahead is blocked. Change the road. Mo Lien ordered coldly. Your highness. The coachman hurriedly said, the outside is blocked by the crowd, and we can't turn into the left side road. Mo Lien lifted the curtain of the carriage with one hand and glanced outside. Sure enough, there was a sea of people in front of them. Even the crossroads were full of people. The two of them got off the carriage hand in hand. When they turned around, the road behind them was also blocked by the crowd and carriages. They were in a dilemma. What's up ahead? The little stoic asked curiously. I don't know. Why is the road suddenly so congested? Complaints could be heard from the crowd. A woman standing next to their carriage stealthily glanced at Xiao Mu and Mo Lien, and she was secretly speechless. Suddenly, she felt a chill on the back of her feet. The woman looked down and hurriedly took a few steps back. She cried out, oh my, where did such cold water come from? At this moment, the little stoic was currently standing on a stool. When she lowered her head to look, sure enough, she saw a layer of water flowing over from the direction of the city gates, mixed with a multitude of miscellaneous roars. Move aside, move aside, move aside, all of you move aside. Wow, aren't these people from the Long family? What are they doing? What are they transporting with so many carriages? This bunch of grandsons blocked the road ahead and behind. Everyone was grumbling, and the little stoic also jumped off the stool. However, before her feet touched the ground, she felt her small body being picked up by Prince Mo. The ground is very wet. Mo Lien looked down and disdainfully lifted her feet. The surface of his brocade boots was already wet from the water. Chapter 3696. Arbor lowered her head and looked in the direction of the Long family's carriages. Sure enough, she saw the Long family's dozens of guards, cursing and shoving the passers-by, trying their best to pull the carriages over. The main reason was that they had more than a dozen carriages. If they passed one by one, it wouldn't be blocked. But they had to line up, squeezing in front and back, taking up the entire road. The passers-by complained incessantly. The carriages on the other side and the pedestrians' carriages behind them couldn't pass at all. In addition, the Long family's carriage was like dragging a large coffin. The carriage was nailed all around with nails, not even a small window was opened. But there were rows of thin holes on the carriage walls, as if to let people breathe. Water flowed out from the holes. More than a dozen carriages were of the same design. Over time, the water flowing out from the holes gradually made the entire street wet. Arbor's eyes gradually narrowed. Her heart felt inexplicably heavy, as if her breathing was being suppressed. Looking at the carriage's design, her heart overflowed with a trace of a bad premonition. At this time, the Long family was negotiating with the carriages blocking the road in front, asking them to quickly move to the sides. The carriages and pedestrians were squeezed together. Everywhere, there were pedestrians shouting and crying. It was so noisy that it gave people a headache. Get out of the way, get out of the way, get out of the way. The Long family guard leading the group held a whip and rode his horse to Mo Lien and Arbor's side. Then, he was startled. He saw the symbol of a black clan dragon on the carriage's emblem. The Long family guard leader was so frightened that he almost rolled off his horse. This was the Mo royal family's emblem. This kind of emblem, other than the emperor, only the crown prince could be used as a symbol of identity. He didn't dare to be rash. He quickly flipped off his horse and rushed forward to pay his respects. Greetings, greetings to your highness. The Long family is so imposing. Mo Lien coldly said, the entire street in the South City is owned by your Long family. No, it's a misunderstanding. The Long family's guard leader hurriedly shook his head and said with a smile, it's this commoner and the others' fault. It's just that there were too many goods this time, which was why we were in the way. Don't worry, your highness. I'll move the carriage over. The Long family's guard didn't dare to ask the crown prince's carriage to let them pass. He yelled at the guards behind him, telling them to quickly turn the carriage around and make way for the crown prince's carriage. Arbor looked coldly at this person's behavior and suddenly said, open the carriage. The guard leader couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment before quickly shaking his head. No, Crown Princess, these dozen carriages of goods are extremely important. They're all seafood, and can't be exposed to the light. They've all been sealed by the Water Spirit Master's barrier. Once it's opened, it'll leak. Then, I'll give it to the guests. That way, it won't be too fresh. Seafood. Arbor's eyes coldly stared at the people in front of her. She waved her hand and said, open it. A group of purple forest guards immediately rushed forward, unsheathing the swords at their waists, and slashing down at the carriage. Bang! Crack! The carriage was split into two halves. The pieces fell to the ground. Large amounts of clear water gushed out of the carriage and rushed towards the crowd. Caught off guard, everyone revealed a dumbfounded expression one after another. Chapter 3697. Pft, pft. The people who were implicated all wiped their faces and wiped away the water droplets in their eyes and ears before spitting out several mouthfuls of saliva in succession. "Mama, are these the legendary merfolk?" A child's clear and melodious voice came from the side, and it carried a trace of curiosity as it rushed into Arbor's ears. This voice made Arbor return to her senses. At this time, Mo Lien had already moved to her side and grasped her small hand. She asked with a somewhat anxious expression, "Jojo, what's wrong?" Arbor shook her head, and her icy gaze landed on the ground in front of her. 3 young women were washed out of the carriage along with the large amount of clear water. To be precise, it should be 3 merfolk women. They wore simple chest wraps on their upper bodies, but their lower bodies revealed fishtails that were covered in scars. At this moment, they were huddled together with ghastly pale faces, and their palm-sized pale faces clearly revealed traces of terror and nervousness. A ball of heat floated up in Arbor's chest and abdomen, burning like a raging flame. A wisp of nameless fire followed the little stoic's heart and lungs and burned all the way to the top of her head. Angry at their incompetence. Every time she saw these merfolk, they would always be abused to the point that even their parents wouldn't recognize them. They simply disappointed her to the core. Arbor didn't know where this disappointment in her heart came from. Right now, she only felt that her chest was choked by a ball of air, so choked that she wanted to go crazy. She wanted to slaughter people and beat up this bunch of weaklings in front of her. "Get up! Get up!" The little fellow struggled free of Mo Lien's hand and angrily pounced to one of the merfolk women's side. She grabbed her arm and pulled the curled-up person up. "Get up!" She flung her heavily, causing that trembling merfolk girl to crash heavily into another person behind her. "I told you to get up, did you hear me?" At this time, Arbor didn't care that her shoes were wet. She stepped on the water and walked up to that girl with a clatter. She glared at her and said, "Stand up. Stand up by yourself." The 3 mermaids were simply scared silly by this fiendish little stoic, but they tactfully straightened their bodies while trembling. It was just that their lower bodies were fishtails, and at this moment, only their upper bodies were raised. However, their fishtails were very flexible and sturdy. Even if they were walking on flat ground, it was not much different from their legs. They swam very quickly as if they were walking on flat ground. The little stoic threw out a sword from her inner world. With a clang, she threw it in front of a mermaid and shouted sternly, "Pick it up." The 3 girls stared at her with wide, frightened eyes, and then looked at one another. "I told you to take it," the little stoic roared angrily. In an instant, the entire southern city street that was bustling with noise instantly quieted down. "Kill him. Kill them." Arbor pointed at one of the Long family disciples and shouted. It frightened the Long family disciples who were originally standing to the side into taking a few steps back one after another. One of the 3 mermaids instantly burst into tears. How would she dare to pick up the sword on the ground? She trembled and retreated 2 steps back. A trace of fury burst out of Arbor's eyes. He rushed up and stretched out his leg to kick that cowardly thing, but the sharp-eyed and nimble Mo Lien hugged him from behind. "Jojo, Jojo. Trash, trash!" Arbor shouted angrily. Chapter 3698. No one can save you. No one can save you. In his rage, Arbor kicked the broken carriage on the ground. "Look at what you've become. From your body to your soul, you're all weaklings, cowards. They didn't even have the courage to pick up their swords to fight back, let alone talk about the future. Mo Lien hurriedly reached out and pulled her over, gently patting her back as she said gently, "All right, Jojo, all right, don't be angry. Don't be angry, Jojo, be good." Mo Lien saw that she was very agitated, and hurriedly raised her hand to rub the back of her head, whispering, "Why are you angry with them?" Truly a bunch of mud that couldn't be helped up to the wall, making his Chow Chow so angry, simply hateful. Mo Lien looked up, and her cold gaze shot towards the people of the Long family. Seeing this, all the members of the Long family took a few steps back with a strong desire to survive. A hint of vigilance appeared on their faces. What a joke! If they were really remembered by this master, it wouldn't be a good thing. What happened? A cold rebuke came from behind the crowd. As the people around them squeezed to the sides, a small path was formed in the middle. The woman in the lead was dressed in a pea-green robe, and under her faint crescent-shaped eyebrows, her smile was quite sweet. Arbor glanced over, and immediately recognized that this was the Long family's eldest young Miss, Long Min, who had gone through the Sun-Moon Mystery Realm with them. When Long Min saw Xiao Mu, he was also slightly startled. Afterwards, he walked up with a smile and cupped his fists in greeting, saying, "Your Highness the Crown Prince Consort, apologies. Did some insensible juniors in the clan disturb you too?" These words were said with a hint of flattery. After all, Long Min had seen Arbor's cultivation on the way here. If it wasn't necessary, she really didn't want to be enemies with this group of people. Going against the royal family was already a very unwise move. "Sister, why are you so polite to them?" A rude roar came from behind Long Min. Long Min turned her head to look, and her brows could not help but furrow slightly. She saw her younger brother, Long Chong, with more than a dozen manservants, roaring as they ran over. Without saying a word, they put on an appearance of wanting to fight. "What are you doing?" Long Min shouted angrily, a trace of annoyance in her eyes. This younger brother of hers was usually spoiled by his mother until he was out of control. He didn't have any other skills, but his ability to cause trouble was top-notch. They dared to be so rude to the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess. Did they really think that the Long family could do whatever they wanted in Dragonflame City? After all, the two people in front of him were at the top of the Divine Prefecture. Putting aside their own strength, just the elite forces under them were not something that a mere Long family could resist. Long Chong glared at Xiao Mu indignantly with his bull-like eyes as he hooted, "The Crown Prince Consort can't be so unreasonable, right? What kind of logic is that to casually split open someone's carriage and check their goods?" Goods? Arbor's gaze instantly sharpened, and like an arrowhead, he shot unwaveringly at Long Chong opposite him. When Long Chong saw this, he reflexively took a step back. When he realized this almost reflexive action of his entire face suddenly flushed red. He actually retreated in fright from the little stoic's gaze. This was truly an extremely cowardly action. Chapter 3699. But at this moment, no one knew how much fear Long Chong was feeling. He even felt a faint pain as he dragged one of his legs. He remembered that at the palace banquet, it was the little crown princess who ordered a golem to drag him out of the banquet and beat him up. It was this despicable woman who ordered the golem to break one of his legs. Therefore, even today, Long Chong still felt a faint pain in the leg that he had once injured. Even Long Chong vaguely realized that from the moment he saw the little crown princess, this left leg that had been torn off by the golem began to hurt unbearably. Long Chong was very clear that this was a physical defect that was reflected in a psychological illness. It was a reflexive feeling of fear. Although he hated this feeling, there was nothing he could do about it. Long Chong roared fiercely. Did I say something wrong? Arbor turned his face and glanced at him indifferently. Long Chang shouted angrily, "All Long family members, listen to my orders and bring the carriage back to the Long family." Mo Lien said indifferently, "Open the other carriages." As soon as he said that, countless figures emerged from the crowd and quickly surrounded the carriage. Along with a series of ping ping and pa chi sounds suddenly sounded. The remaining dozen or so carriages were all split open by the purple forest guards. The crowd moved back noisily to make way for him. But a lot of clear water gushed out of the carriage, and 30 to 40 mermen rolled out of the carriage along with the water. Arbor glanced at them and saw that most of these mermen were young women, and there were a few elderly and children. The wounds on the young merman's body were even more messy, and it was obvious that he had suffered even more severe abuse. Among these mermen, some had lacerations on their tails, and some had half of their tails broken. All of them appeared to be in a sorry state, and their faces were extremely pale. Now that they were suddenly able to see the light again, it was obvious that they were somewhat panic-stricken. Long Min looked at this scene with an unsightly expression, and she turned to say to Mo Lien, "Isn't His Highness the Crown Prince being too overbearing by doing this?" These mermen were indeed captured by them from the coast. Since they were the prey that they had caught, they should belong to the Long family. Now that the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess had interfered, it was naturally overboard. "Although the Long family is weak, we can't allow your highness to bully us like this. This is the prey that the Long family obtained. It makes sense no matter what you say." Long Min said coldly and bowed in the direction of the imperial city. "Even if we meet the emperor in the Golden Palace, tie her up." "Yes." At the young crown prince consort's order, the purple forest guards immediately surged forward without any hesitation. 2 purple forest guards jumped in front of Long Chang's arms behind her back. 2 long swords were placed on the neck of the clamoring Long Chang. Long Min's expression changed abruptly. She struggled against her arms and shouted, "The laws of the 3 states don't explicitly state that we can't hunt mermen." "Slap her mouth." The young crown prince consort interrupted Long Min's words with a stern shout. Without another word, a purple forest guard stepped forward and slapped Long Min's left cheek. Chapter 3700. Long Min was immediately slapped to the face, and a series of illusionary booms sounded in her ears. It was obvious how fast and ruthless this slap was. "Sister." Long Chang had a long sword pressed against his neck, and he shouted angrily, "Is there any law in Dragonflame City? Can you dispose of human lives at will just because you hold a position of power? Human lives." Arbor could not help but snort coldly. He struggled free from Mo Lien's embrace and pounced forward to kick Long Chang in the chest. He kicked twice fiercely and roared angrily, "Do you have any law in your eyes? Human lives. You little beast, you have no ruler, no family, and no country. If you did, would you capture your own family members? Would you do this to them?" Arbor scolded angrily as he went berserk and kicked Long Chang in the chest 17 to 18 times. He kicked Long Chang until he spat out a mouthful of blood. "Long Chang." Long Min's expression changed as she roared angrily. At this moment, the crowd of onlookers could not help but mutter softly. "So the Long family is really a branch of the merfolk race. I really didn't expect them to be so vicious. They actually captured their own family members. I heard that the little crown princess's mother, Long Chuyun, is a member of the Long family in the Sea of Forgetfulness. The Long family is the royal bloodline of the merfolk. In the Sea of Forgetfulness, Long is a common surname. All mermaids and mermen are subjects of the royal bloodline. TSK, I didn't expect this branch family to be so vicious. They can even do this to the people of their own family. That's right. Listen to what they said. It's as if these merfolk are goods that can be slaughtered and eaten at will. No wonder the little crown princess is so angry. Bah, those who can treat their own family members like this are really not good people. Crown Princess. Longmin twisted her arms that were held behind her back and shouted angrily, "Don't go too far, Crown Princess. Our aristocratic families and the royal family have always minded our own business. Don't even think about provoking a dispute between us. The fact that the Long family brought so many mermen into the capital is a malicious act." Mo Lien coldly interrupted Long Min's words. She raised her hand and said calmly, "Now, you're even slandering the Crown Princess. That's an even bigger crime. Men, capture everyone from the Long family. This Crown Prince wants to have a good chat with the Long family's head. How did he teach his children to be so disrespectful to the Crown Princess?" Long Min's entire body quivered, and she hurriedly lowered her head in submission. She said in a small voice, Long Min's words were too extreme, but I asked Crown Prince to see that Long Min is anxious for her younger brother. That's why, Your Highness, the Long family has no ill intentions. These mermen were actually captured by Patriarch Lin and my father. Mermen have mermaid pearls in their bodies, Your Highness. As long as we get the pearls, we will definitely offer them to His Majesty. We definitely won't dare to keep them for ourselves. Xiao Mu's two small fists tightly clenched together, and her large eyes brimming with hatred and fury glared in Long Min's direction with her pitch-black, round eyes. Bastard! Jojo! Mo Lien suddenly moved to the little fellow's side and hurriedly reached out to pull her into his embrace. He lowered his head with a frown. His slender fingers pried open her tightly curled little hands and stroked the red marks that her fingernails had left on her palm. Chapter 3701. Jojo, don't hurt yourself because of some dead people. Mo Lien looked down at her in displeasure. If you're this angry, I'll give the order to exterminate the Long family. It's not worth making you this angry over such a small matter. Sir Jojo only felt an unbearable stuffiness in his chest. At the same time, his chest seemed to be burning hot, making his blood boil. Not every mermaid has a mermaid pearl. Hundreds of thousands of mermaids might not even have a single mermaid pearl. I know. Mo Lien looked down at the little girl whose eyes were red and said helplessly in a low voice, but not everyone is as smart as my Jojo. There are so many idiots in this world. Aren't they all used to set off my Jojo's incomparable intelligence? Sir Jojo blinked his large eyes and sniffed his little nose. He punched him neither lightly nor heavily. I'm so angry. Angry that these mermaids were tortured so miserably each time. She had already handed them knives and given them a chance, but they didn't dare to retaliate. All right. My Jojo, what's there to be angry about? Mo Lien turned to look in Long Min's direction, and his eyes, which were as gentle as spring, gradually faded away. A cold voice sounded faintly. Just make them disappear. Long Min seemed to understand something. Looking at the Crown Prince's eyes, his entire body trembled. Pass down this Crown Prince's order. The Long family brought a large group of outsiders into the capital without permission. They didn't obtain the Emperor's permission and didn't go through any formalities. They hid it from the capital magistrate and conspired against the law. In order to prevent them from being deceitful, all of them are now in prison and under strict supervision. Order the Ministry of Justice and the capital magistrate to investigate this case. We must investigate the truth. Yes. A large group of purple forest guards rushed over from all directions. Hundreds of long swords and thousands of long swords surrounded the Long family members present. How could the Long family resist when they saw the large group of people surrounding them? They raised their hands in surrender and looked at the surrounding soldiers with pale faces. Where are these people? Mo Lien nodded and pointed in the direction of the merman. The little crown princess had a stoic expression on her face as she said in a fit of pique, "I don't want to care." The crown prince didn't know whether to laugh or cry. With his intelligence, he knew that his wife was just angry at the moment. If he really didn't care about these people and casually drove them out of the city to fend for themselves, his wife would definitely regret it later. He hugged his wife with a smile and said softly, "Then I'll put them in a nearby mansion for the time being. When you're in a good mood, you can go and see them. How about that?" "No." Okay, I won't see you." Mo Lien lowered his head and nuzzled her small head as he grumbled, "A bunch of weaklings. They didn't even bleed much after being slaughtered, and they even dirted Chow Chow's small hands. Just let them fend for themselves in the resort." The little fellow puffed up her cheeks and turned her little face away in a huff. Mo Lien turned her head and looked in the direction of the merman. She waved her hand and said to Xiao Yi, who was bouncing over, "There's a small villa nearby. You know where it is. Arrange for them to stay there first." "Okay, Your Highness." Arbor was still huffing and puffing, but she didn't turn to look at the merman. Suddenly, she felt a slight chill on her leg. When she looked down, she saw a little merman about 3 or 4 years old, who couldn't even swim steadily, hugging her leg. Chapter 3702. An old woman hurriedly swam forward and crossed her arms in front of her chest. She said respectfully and fearfully, "Esteemed Crown Princess of the Divine Prefecture, please forgive my grandson's rudeness. It's because you are filled with a fascinating water spirit power." The mermaid stammered as she explained. There was also a mysterious power that made mere people feel comfortable when they got close. The old woman did not dare to continue. She only looked respectfully at Arbor and sincerely lowered her head. Mermaids and mermen were proud by nature. Normally, they wouldn't even look at the humans on the land. They had always been peace-loving, and would not intentionally play with weapons. Except for the elite troops specially trained by the royal family, the other mermaids and mermen could be said to be powerless. They did not have much combat strength, but they had their own pride. Even when they were captured by the Long family, none of them would lower their noble heads. But now, the old mermaid willingly lowered her head in front of this esteemed crown princess whose name she could not name. She had a strange feeling. It seemed to be an instinct that made her submit to this crown princess in front of her. The 3 or 4-year-old little merman was wrapped around Arbor's leg. He suddenly raised his head and smiled at her, showing his teeth. Her 2 small canine teeth were very cute. Although her small round face was full of dirt and her cheeks were thin due to hunger, her eyes were very bright, so bright that it almost made the sky lose its color. The fury in Xiao Mu's heart inexplicably faded away by quite a bit. She took out a handful of peanuts from her pocket and stuffed them into the little brat hugging her leg. She turned around with a cold expression. Prince Mo's eyes lit up. He hurriedly waved his hand at Xiao Yi and had them send the mermaid back to the villa. He held his wife's hand and boarded the carriage together. As the purple forest guards maintained order and separated the pedestrians, the carriage finally moved again and headed toward the city gate. Arbor turned and looked out the window. Under the urging of the purple forest guard, 30 to 40 mermen moved and swam in the direction of the southern courtyard. Although their fishtails were tough, they were still injured. When they rubbed against the uneven ground, they would occasionally leave a trace of blood. Arbor retracted his gaze and frowned. He pretended to be careless and muttered, "I don't even know if the small villa can fit so many people." Mo Lien pursed his lips and suppressed the mirth in his voice as he said softly, "I bought that courtyard in the past. It's quite big, and it's a courtyard that lives by the water. There's half a lake in the back, so it can accommodate quite a few people." The little fellow pursed his lips and rolled his big eyes. Then, he mumbled softly, "Why didn't I know? Mo Lien really couldn't help but want to laugh. She hurriedly reached out and hugged this funny and awkward baby into her arms. She pressed her little head against hers and laughed in a deep voice. You can't blame me for that. When the two of us were on Seacone Planet, I already gave you the title deeds to all the properties under my name for safekeeping. The little fellow humphed awkwardly and didn't say anything else. Mo Lien couldn't help but lower her head and kiss her a few times. She said with a smile, "Why are you so funny? You're the funny one. Your whole family is funny." Humph. Chapter 3703. The little stoic glared at him before retracting her gaze and immediately changing the topic. How much longer until we arrive? We'll arrive in 15 minutes after leaving the city, Mo Lien replied with a smile. Jojo Arbor suddenly covered his mouth and pointed at the roof of the carriage, indicating for him to listen. Mo Lien was startled, and within seconds, he heard a rather loud flapping of wings. He pulled down the curtain next to him and saw a machine-operated bird fly in from outside. It flapped its wings a few times before folding them up. The bird's face was wooden as it crouched on the tea tray placed on the side. The two of them looked at each other in dismay. They both recognized that this was the machine-operated bird that the Academy used to transmit messages. "Hello, Student Mo Lien, Student Arbor." That messenger bird's mouth opened and closed, and Headmaster Yun's voice was transmitted from it. "In view of the fact that you've been wandering outside for a long time, this headmaster needs to remind you. This year's Heavenly Yuan ranking competition is about to begin. The preliminaries are set to begin on the 18th of this month. The preliminaries will last for 10 days. The preliminaries' content will be announced on the day of the preliminaries. In order to prevent you two from missing the competition, this headmaster's divine foresight has deduced your location and various, after a string of nonsense." Arbor looked at the frowning Mo Lien and pursed his lips. He had already decided to punch this noisy machine-operated bird out the window. This Yun Piaomiao finally entered his main topic. The Royal Academy has given everyone a time limit of 3 days. You two must immediately return to the Academy within 3 days. Otherwise, your names will be removed. In addition, Mo Lien, Duan Yu, Ming Yasi, and some other people's contribution points are already in the negatives. Arbor, your contribution points are almost reaching 0. The Royal Academy's rule is that people with 0 contribution points must go to the Great Forest alone and stay there for a month. Of course, people with negative contribution points must scram even more. Headmaster Yun's roar came from that machine-operated bird's stomach. The little stoic and Prince Mo silently looked at each other again and both pursed their lips. As the dean, was it really okay for him to be so agitated? Dean Yun calmed his breathing and said in a deep voice, 3 days. I want to see all of you back in 3 days. The Academy hasn't been very peaceful recently. You should know what's going on. My ethereal peak has welcomed 3 waves of people blessed by the heavens. It's all because of you two. Immediately, return within 3 days. The mechanical bird stopped abruptly. Sir Jojo exchanged glances with Prince Mo and snorted disdainfully. How immoral. Wasn't it just because he attracted some enemies? Wasn't it because he was strong enough? If they were ordinary people, Jojo wouldn't have bothered to cause trouble for them. If Principal Yun could hear Jojo's thoughts at this moment, he would definitely spit on her face and say to her, "Thank your ancestors for 18 generations. I reckon that the Academy isn't too peaceful these days." Mo Lien coughed lightly and said, "Otherwise, the principal wouldn't be so agitated." Forget it. Since the Heavenly Yuan ranking competition is about to start, let's set off the day after tomorrow. Arbor rolled his eyes. The day after tomorrow. Jojo has a transportation talisman matrix. We can make it in time. Mo Lien nodded with a grin. We can also make a trip back to the sect on the way. After returning to the academy, we'll be separated from Jojo. Mo Lien hugged her pitifully. Chapter 3704. We've only been married for 2 days, so let hubby spend more time with Jojo. You. The little crown princess's face inexplicably flushed red, and she punched him hard. Scram. I did scram. Mo Lien blinked and said with a grin, didn't I scram here? Arbor couldn't resist chuckling and rolled his eyes at him in exasperation. The carriage rocked to a stop. Mo Lien lifted the curtain and pulled Arbor out of the carriage before walking toward the court ahead. This court in the suburbs appeared to be unguarded, but in reality, there were hidden guards everywhere. There were no obstructions on the way in, and there was no one at all. The two had just stepped into the courtyard when they heard a displeased voice with a smile. Dawdling, did the journey take this long? Look how long I've been waiting for you two. Xiao Mu looked over and saw a man in plain clothes sitting under a camphor tree in the atrium, his posture slender and graceful. He held a cup in one hand as he gazed at them with a beaming smile. Ripples rippled in his peach blossom eyes. Prince Mo immediately blocked his wife's line of sight. Sir Jojo poked his head out from behind him and continued to glance at Duanyu, who was in the courtyard. What's there to see? Naturally, it's because I'm good-looking. Duanyu appeared in front of them in a flash and ran to Arbor's side. Jojo, long time no see. Shouldn't you give me a hug first? Hug my ass. Mo Lien brusquely yanked this guy aside and pulled him toward the dungeon. You caught him. Humph. Duanyu pridefully brushed aside his hand. Why are you pulling me? My hand is only for Jojo to pull. Bah. Mo Lien glared at him, annoyed and amused at the same time. She poked him with her finger and said, let's go. Mr. Jojo tilted his head and stared at the two men who were messing around in front of him. Suddenly, he shouted, what are you doing? The two of them reflexively distanced themselves and simultaneously turned to look at the expressionless little stoic. Jojo, I've set a trap in the dark and captured that peak immortal venerable. We used up a lot of God's stone cannons. Duanyu's figure flashed, and he arrived in front of Arbor. He said with a grin, I'll take you to take a look. Mo Lien hurried over and pulled Jojo to her side. I was the one who provided the God's stone cannons. Xiao Mu walked down the dungeon. Rongli was previously imprisoned here by you. Both of them nodded at the same time. Then where is he now? Duanyu pointed here and there, pointing to the sky and then to the ground. They're everywhere. Mr. Jojo rolled his eyes exasperatedly. It meant that he was burned to ashes and blended into the air. Then since Rongli is dead, why did you capture that peak immortal venerable for? Rongli thought we would fall for his lies. Duanyu chuckled. If Venerable Immortal Jinsheng and those two spiritual venerables didn't receive enough benefits, how could they be willing to sell their lives for a mere Rongli? So. Arbor narrowed his eyes. They also know that you possess the spirit domain, the two of them said tacitly before glaring at each other. As long as we dispose of these three people, this matter will be considered over, Duanyu said with a smile. As they spoke, they had already arrived in front of the wooden fenced cages imprisoning Venerable Immortal Jinsheng and those two spiritual venerables. Chapter 3705. Inside this cage, the person whose hands and feet were shackled was a middle-aged man with disheveled hair. Seeing the three people approaching, that man fiercely struggled against the iron cuffs on his hands and hissed, "Despicable and shameless people. This venerable immortal really didn't expect that a transcendent god realm could be so shameless. These two transcendent god realm cultivators didn't play by the rules at all. First, they put on a hypocritical face and pretended to be friendly with them, even treating them as honored guests. Then, they poisoned them and used godly cannons to deal with them, mobilizing thousands of people to encircle and annihilate the three of them. Ha! Merely the experts at the god rank realm numbered over 1,000, let alone those spirit realm cultivators that covered the heavens and the earth like ants. As the saying went, even ants could freaking bite an elephant to death. It was precisely these three who were unlucky. This venerable immortal Jin Shang originally planned to use this opportunity to carry out Plan B and secretly kidnap the little girl, but who knew humans were truly shameless and two-faced people. Sir Jojo's small face was taut as he looked at the middle-aged man who was roaring thunderously inside. What did you two do to anger him to this extent? Do you still need to ask? A light voice landed next to Arbor. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and Little Ticeway popped out of the star domain again and looked with amusement at the middle-aged man who suddenly looked up and glared at them. These two fellows are so wicked. They clearly knew that this person was secretly plotting to capture you, but they didn't do anything and even courteously invited them to eat, drink, and stay in the best residence. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal quickly pulled Sir Jojo's small hand to his side and said earnestly, "Jojo, you can't win against these two-faced fellows. Remember not to get too close to them in the future. They really were too wicked." Mo Lien quickly pulled his wife back, his phoenix eyes dangerously sweeping a certain venerable immortal who was slandering them. "Shut up. Hey, Jojo, look. I hit the nail on the head with this person's wicked intentions, so he's flying into a rage out of humiliation." Mo Lien hastily hugged her wifey's waist and immediately declared, this idea was all Duan Yu's idea. This wasn't the first time he had betrayed his brother. Duan Yu angrily glared back. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal could not help but laugh. At this time, the middle-aged man who was detained in the cage shook the chains desperately, and a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. The little girl really has a spirit domain. When the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and Little Ticeway came out, they did not avoid these three people. The other two late-stage spiritual supremacy realm cultivators who were being held in solitary confinement also looked sharply at the little stoic. So what if there is? In any case, it has nothing to do with you. Arbor glared at venerable immortal Jin Shang and rolled his eyes. It hasn't been easy for the three of you to cultivate to this point. Do you want to die or submit? Make your choice. Venerable immortal Jin Shang's eyes flash with anger. You want us to submit to you? Damn girl, you splat. A pitch-black whip of light flashed into the cage and landed on venerable immortal Jin Shang's body like a bolt of lightning. Venerable immortal Jin Shang bellowed in pain, and he glared fixedly at Mo Lien, who was making a move. He shouted harshly, "Let me out if you have the guts. We'll talk after a real fight." Sir Jojo turned his small face. Sure enough, he saw that the other fellows behind him were rolling their eyes as if they were cut from the same cloth. Isn't your synchronized expressions a little too comical? Chapter 3706. Especially the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and Little Ticeway. Weren't the two of them looking down on Duan Yu and Mo Lien's despicable methods earlier? Why were they rolling their eyes at the same time now, completely disagreeing with venerable immortal Jin Shang's idea of fighting with real swords and spears? Shameless fellows. To think that you're all transcendent realm experts. You actually did such a despicable and shameless thing. If we were in the holy domain, I would definitely teach you a lesson. All is fair in war. Duan Yu aloofly interrupted venerable immortal Jin Shang's clamor. That Rongli was very funny, actually deceiving him. How many people did he tell about the spirit domain? Wouldn't everything be revealed after a soul search? Truly a naive person. Since they knew that Jin Shang and the other two late-stage spiritual venerable realm experts knew about the portable spirit domain, then they naturally had to control them as quickly as possible. Therefore, the best way was to bide his time and treat him as an honored guest. It was also because venerable immortal Jin Shang and the other two fellows were too careless. Moreover, they saw that Duan Yu and Mo Lian's cultivation levels weren't low, so they didn't dare to fall out with them on the spot. Hence, they wanted to secretly play dirty tricks. Who knew? Let the three of us go. We'll fight. So annoying. Little Tai Sui impatiently interrupted venerable immortal Jin Shang. Hurry and hand over a strand of your soul. If they wanted to control a transcendent realm expert, they could only make them hand over a strand of their soul. There was no other way. However, this was also a very damaging method to their pride. When venerable immortal Jin Shang and the other two late-stage spiritual venerable realm experts heard this, they instantly trembled in anger, their eyes bulging. Don't even think about it. Arbor turned around and disdainfully said, then kill them. So annoying. She also didn't want several inconsiderate subordinates by her side. She also had to guard against any tricks they might play in the future. The four men looked at each other, bewildered. The little girl was truly aloof enough. These were three transcendent realm experts, and they were finally captured alive. Didn't she feel reluctant to kill them just like that? What's the use? Arbor said coldly. You're not on my side, and you want to capture me, take my spirit realm, and keep me for the new year? The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal nodded. Jojo is right. Let's kill him. Then he turned and ran in the direction of Arbor, waving his hand. I'll leave it to you. Mo Lian and Duan Yu looked at each other before raising their hands at the same time. The two spiritual supremacies in the cage hurriedly cried out, No, don't. Don't kill me. At this moment, they were really panicking. It was really not easy to cultivate to this level. But now, he was going to lose his life for no reason. Since that was the case, he might as well submit. I'm willing to give you a wisp of my soul, the two spiritual venerables said hurriedly. You guys. Venerable immortal Jin Shang suddenly turned his head to look at his companions in the cage. As his hands moved, the sound of chains being pulled could be heard. Little Tai Sui quickly turned around and called out, Lass, these two fellows agreed. Sir Jojo pattered back and pinched little Tai Sui's small face in passing. Why are you pretending to be old? Every time she saw this 8 or 9-year-old boy call her lass, with a sullen face, she had the urge to beat him up. Little Tai Sui puffed up his bun face and looked at this rebellious little thing in displeasure. Chapter 3707. The little stoic took out an oath from her pocket and tossed it in front of the two. Sign this oath too while you're at it. Although soul remembrance was important, with the heavenly Tao oath's binding power, Sir Jojo would be more at ease with this double guarantee. After all, they weren't on their side, so they had to be on guard. Zhao Xing, Liang Yi. You really want to submit to someone? Venerable immortal Jin Shang looked at his two companions in astonishment. Back then, when they came down from the holy region, they were so high-spirited. They didn't expect to suffer such a huge setback when they returned to the tiny divine continent. The two spiritual supremacies were extremely intelligent people. Since they had already made up their minds, they wouldn't hesitate at all. They took the oath and pen with one hand and signed it. At least there was still hope if they were alive, but there was nothing if they were dead. Venerable immortal Jin Shang was silent for a while before lowering his head dejectedly. His head drooped almost to his chest, and he appeared extremely dejected. Arbor glanced at him through the wooden fence and then waved his hand, letting the two spiritual supremacies out. He knew her biggest secret, yet he couldn't submit to her. There was no helping it. Every man for himself. Before she was completely strong, she couldn't take any risks. Kindness couldn't save the world. Deal with them. Mo Lien held his wife's small hand and turned to walk out. Venerable Immortal Jin Shang suddenly looked up with a struggling and exhausted expression. He nodded slowly and heavily. I'm willing to submit. The young couple narrowed their eyes at the same time and glanced sideways at the figures behind the fence. After Venerable Immortal Jin Shang, Zhao Xing, and Liang Yi left the cage with Arbor's group, they went to the courtyard's living room and sat down. Arbor glanced at the three people and asked, "Now, can you tell me what you originally wanted to do when you came to the Divine Continent from the Holy Region?" Venerable Immortal Jin Shang's expression was slightly bitter, and he said with a wry smile, "To tell you the truth, some time ago, someone spread the news that there's a mineral vein in the Divine Continent. We all came for this. So other than the three of you, there are actually other Transcendent Realm experts here?" Honored Immortal Jin Shang and the other two nodded, "Yes." "What about these people?" "They are not on the same side as us. We are all moving separately and will not interfere with each other." Venerable Immortal Jin Shang said, "Because of the existence of the restrictions of the Heavenly Tao, our strength has been suppressed quite a bit." Jin Shang Venerable Immortal suddenly lifted his head and looked at Mo Lien, the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and the others in confusion. "How did all of you? The cultivation of these four people should be above the celestial venerable realm." Jin Shang even felt that with his current cultivation, he couldn't tell how strong two of the young men were. This made him feel a little shocked, and his mind was also in a whirl. As a transcendent god, he was not restricted by the heavenly Tao. This kind of thing was really unbelievable. But the truth was right in front of his eyes, and he had no choice but to admit it. It seemed that these young men were all very strange. It was not an injustice for the three of them to fall into their hands. Thinking of this, Jin Shang could not help but sigh. He turned to look at Mo Lien and said with a wry smile, "That's all we know. The news of the holy bloodline is very tempting to every transcendent god. You should know that." Chapter 3708. Mo Lien nodded and took out a holy stone from her inner world, tossing it in front of the trio. The Divine Province does indeed have a holy meridian. However, you won't be able to find it at the moment. This holy meridian had completely collapsed following the Earth's tremors. In that case, he still couldn't let Huifeng lead his men to mine. At least, he absolutely couldn't do so before he had enough assurance. Otherwise, if he attracted the attention of those transcendent realm cultivators scattered all over the Divine Province, Huifeng's group wouldn't be enough to be slaughtered by them despite their numbers. Supremacy Immortal Jin Shang and the others' eyes lit up as they landed on that holy stone. They subconsciously reached out to touch that bone-chilling stone. "Take this stone to absorb and recover first. Set off with us the day after tomorrow for the Royal Academy." Previously, in order to trick them, Prince Mo had used all sorts of methods to deal with them. Since the three of them were considered his people now, he naturally wouldn't treat them unfairly. Supremacy Immortal Jin Shang was startled, and delight naturally surfaced in his eyes. This holy stone was palm-sized. After absorbing it, not only could it heal his injuries, but it could also advance his cultivation. It truly was a rare item. After this matter was settled, the young couple bid farewell to Duan Yu. When they returned to the city, Arbor and Mo Lien went to the south of the city to settle down the group of mermen. Those miserable mermen had all been settled down at this time and were currently recuperating. Arbor found them, and a slightly older merman came forward and exchanged a few words. He learned that these mermen were captured by the Long family in a small coastal town. It was also because the environment of the River of Forgetfulness had worsened in recent years that a portion of mermen secretly went ashore and built a small village to rest in. As time passed, some small villages actually became small bases for mermen and humans to trade. And the coastal town that these mermen stayed in was such a situation. 10 days ago, those Long family members barged into our town and captured all the mermen. They indulged in the wildest fantasy, believing that a miracle like the merman pearl exists in our bodies. The old mermaid's tone contained a trace of fury when she spoke. These people didn't give us any chance to explain, they just escorted us to the capital. No matter how we explain, they won't listen to us. Crown Princess, is your mother really the first miss of our merfolk race's royal bloodline, Long Chuyun? Arbor didn't answer the old mermaid's question. He just looked at her and said, "What do you plan to do now?" The old woman looked at her awkwardly. "I hope you don't blame those young ladies. It's not that they're weak. It's just that they don't know how to fight with others. Our merfolk race has always been a peace-loving race. We have never been good at fighting with others." Arbor looked at her coldly. "When someone puts a knife to your neck, do you just obediently close your eyes?" This Arbor stood up and said indifferently, "If you want to leave and go to a safe sea, you can inform the guards and I will let them escort you there. This is the greatest help I can think of right now." The old mermaid opened her mouth and looked at the back of the young crown princess coldly as she left. For a moment, she felt a sense of loss. Chapter 3709. The Crown Princess and His Highness the Crown Prince left for the academy early this morning. Upon receiving this news, Mu Jingxing of the Mu family's second branch was rather excited. Wouldn't the matter of the family head be left unsettled? The person in question had already returned to the academy, and who knew how many months it would be before she returned. Since that was the case, the Mu family couldn't be without a family head. The old man was bound to nominate another person to temporarily take over the family's affairs. And the person to take over the family's affairs would definitely be him, Mu Jingxing. Mu Jingxing was the one who knew the most about the family's affairs. The eldest son, Mu Jingfeng, was now in a half-dead state, and he was the only one who could continue to contribute in the family. However, it didn't take long for old Master Mu's order to come down. Before the new family head, Arbor, returned home, the third son, Mu Jingyuan, was ordered to temporarily take over the family's affairs, and the elders would assist him from the side. When Mu Jingxing heard this news, he was so angry that he smashed his own study into smithereens. The entire second branch was shrouded in an oppressive atmosphere for several days. Of course, Arbor didn't know that old Master Mu insisted on leaving him such a big mess to take over. She used the transportation array to teleport several times, and then flew back to Red Cloud's Peak with Mo Lien on the Golden Dragon. At the same time, Yu Xiao led a group of purple forest guards, holding the Crown Prince's order, and surrounded the Long family from top to bottom. However, when they kicked open the Long family's door and entered, they found that the entire Long family was empty. It was as if they suddenly and mysteriously disappeared. From top to bottom, not even a single servant was left. That night, a group of mysterious deity realm cultivators entered the prison of Long Yen City's Ministry of Justice and rescued the two brothers, Long Min and Long Chang, from the prison. When the Crown Prince received this news, he was already in the Imperial Academy. He didn't care too much. The 3 continents were only so big, and the Long family that disappeared had to find a place to stay. The Divine Continent could no longer accommodate them. Tsang Province, Ming Province, could there be a place for them to hide? Eldest senior sister is back. Eldest senior sister is back. Little Canon Fong Su's voice reverberated throughout the entire Red Cloud's Peak. A crowd of holy water sect sisters clustered around their excited second Ant Master, Yang Shirong, and ran out. The large group of people surrounded Su Shanshan and Arbor in the center. After a period of recuperation and cultivation, Su Shanshan's complexion had improved a lot. That day, after using the soul-gathering bell to retrieve eldest senior sister's soul, Arbor tried to use a secret method to help eldest senior sister directly reach the god realm when he was nursing her body. However, it was a pity that she was still half a step behind. Now, eldest senior sister had comprehended 80% of the spiritual water power, but she was still stuck at the half-step divine realm. After using the secret technique, eldest senior sister did not need to go through the 5 spirits reincarnation tribulation anymore. In other words, as long as she stayed at the Holy Waters sect at Rosy Cloud's Peak and carefully entered seclusion for a year, she would definitely be able to naturally break through the threshold of the deity realm one day. Arbor exchanged a few words with his senior and junior sisters and left behind many pills to raise their cultivation. Afterwards, he rushed back to the Imperial Academy with Mo Lien. According to Yun Piaomiao, that swindler, if they didn't hurry back to the Imperial Academy by today, she would erase their names. Fortunately, she had many sets of transportation talisman matrices in her possession. Even if the talisman energy was exhausted, she could just switch to another set and continue the transportation. In the evening, the two finally arrived at Wind Thunder City. Chapter 37:10. When the two of them arrived at the entrance of Wind Thunder City, they found a secluded place and released Master Immortal Jin Shang and the 2 spiritual paragons from the storage talisman. They let the 3 of them and Mo Lien set up a defensive barrier to block the aura of the opening of the spirit region. Arbor then summoned Qi Xianxian, Duanmu Qing and the rest of the 7 of them out of the star region. After a long period of closed-door training, using the spirit breakthrough pill to raise her realm, and taking a medicinal bath to stabilize her body, Qi Xuanxuan's cultivation had already broken through to the 10th level of the spiritual realm. Duanmu Qing had entered the initial success stage of a level 15 spiritual master. Although his realm was higher than Arbor's, his actual battle strength was not much of a match. After all, Lady Jojo had a trump card in her hands. Even a transcending god stage would be defeated if they were not careful. Furthermore, Lady Jojo had never relied on medicine to raise her level. When she broke through, she did not even take the spirit breakthrough pill. Of course, this was also closely related to the sacred wood source, sacred water and sacred earth in her body. She did not need to take any spirit breakthrough pill and could easily break through the bottleneck of her realm. She never felt like she was stuck in the first half of a realm. When the 8 of them stepped into the Wind Thunder City, they saw a swarm of people running towards the Academy Street. Quick, quick! Place your bets in the last 3 minutes. Place your bets. Place your bets. Qi Xianxian grabbed an uncle who was running forward. Hey, uncle. What are you doing? Hey, little girl, did you just come to Wind Thunder City? The people from Tianhua Academy are here to challenge the Royal College again. The daughter of Tianhua Academy's vice principal is really a beauty, the uncle revealed a mesmerized expression, causing Qi Xianxian to hurriedly retract her hand and throw him a few steps back. Do you want to go over and take a look? Let's go back to Misty Peak first and report to Principal Yun. Arbor rolled his eyes and said, otherwise, he will deduct our contribution points for today. Yes, my contribution points are almost gone. Actually, when we went to the Sun Moon Mystery Realm this time, didn't we agree that our days would not be deducted? Why are you deducting our contribution points now? Maybe the dean's brain went haywire. Little Fatty concluded, and everyone looked at him. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, Little Fatty couldn't help but smile foolishly at them. Isn't that the case? The group of people entered the inner city and asked Honored Immortal Jin Shang and the other 2 to find a place to stay. The rest of them headed towards the Misty Peak. While they were still at the bottom of the floating peak, they heard Yun Piaomiao's voice faintly float down. Come up. Without a word, everyone rushed up to Ethereal Peak and saw the dean sitting alone in the courtyard, sipping tea in a relaxed manner. Seeing everyone enter, Yun Piao Miao stood up with a smile and said, "Everyone, welcome home." The little fatty could not help but mutter softly, "This smiling fox, whoever believes him will be unlucky." Qi Xianxian represented her teammates and took a step forward. She placed her hand across her chest and bowed to Principal Yun. She immediately asked, "Principal, what's up with our contribution points? Why are they all deducted?" Yun Piao Miao held the teacup calmly and nodded at her. "It's very simple, because you have been outside for too long. The Academy will automatically take a portion of your contribution points and convert them into holidays." Chapter 37:11. "So now, other than Arbor, all of you have negative contribution points," Yun Piao Miao said calmly as he sipped his tea. "Logically speaking, you should immediately head to the Great Forest in the north-facing forest for a month of individual training," Headmaster Yun said calmly. "However, in view of the fact that the Tianyuan ranking competition is starting in 7 to 8 days, this headmaster will make an exception and give you all a chance to turn over a new leaf." Headmaster Yun sipped his tea and said, "Recently, people from Tianhua Academy came to our school to cause trouble. You must have heard about this, right?" The little stoic, Mo Lian, Duan Muqing, and the others all shook their heads at the same time in tacit understanding, indicating that they were completely unaware of this matter. Headmaster Yun's expression stiffened. He coughed lightly and said, "You don't even know about such an important matter. People from Tianhua Academy set up an arena on Academy Street and challenged our Royal Academy's Divine Prefecture branch. Many students have already gone to accept the challenge. You guys, as outstanding students of our Royal Academy's Divine Prefecture branch, you should take the lead and set an example. This Tianhua Academy is an academy within the Underworld region. They came specifically to challenge your Divine Prefecture branch students. Headmaster, you summoned us back in such a hurry because no one can stop the Huatian Academy from kicking down the door, right?" Qiao Mu interrupted him and voiced the suspicions in everyone's hearts. "Nonsense." Headmaster Yun coughed and stood up. He paced back and forth in front of them with his hands behind his back. "Our Royal Academy has produced many outstanding students. Who knows how many elite students there are among the seniors? How can we not handle the situation?" Everyone replied with an "oh." "What oh?" Headmaster Yun turned around and glared at the little stoic and the others. "Hey, in any case, I won't let you fight in the arena competition with Tianhua Academy's students for free. As long as you win a match, you'll receive 1,000 contribution points. If you participate in a team battle, you'll receive 5,000 contribution points. How about it? This headmaster is very kind to you, right?" The little fatty, Qi Xianxian, and the others said in unison, "This Tianhua Academy must be very troublesome for the headmaster." Little Noodles nodded his head in agreement. Based on his understanding of this stingy dean, it was impossible for him to be so generous. The reason why he was so generous must be because he had a request in mind. While Principal Yun was fuming with rage and glaring, he heard the little stoic say crisply, 2,000. 2,000 contribution points for every victory. 10,000 for group battles. I won't do it for less. You. Dean Yun really wanted to punch her in the face. Why don't you just go and snatch it? Since we can't come to an agreement, then forget it. Arbor turned around and led his team members to leave. Dean Yun gritted his teeth. We'll do as you say. Fuck, if not for the fact that the people from Tianhua Academy were all new students, he would not have had to stop the seniors from coming out to battle just to save his face. Also, how about we reduce the deduction of contribution points by half? The little stoic shuffled next to Headmaster Yun and used her small elbow to nudge Yun Piaomiao's sleeve. All of you, scram. Dean Yun's roar reverberated down from Ethereal Peak and shook the entire inner city. The hearts of the students who were cultivating in the academy trembled for no reason. Chapter 37:12. When the little stoic and her companions returned to Donglin Court, Duan Yu was already sitting under the pear tree in the middle of the hall with a grin. He had brewed a pot of spirit tea and had been waiting for them for a long time. Everyone was feeling thirsty. When they saw the dozen or so small teacups on the table, they all picked them up and poured tea for themselves before pouring it into their mouths. It was 10:00 at night. The setting sun slowly shed its gorgeous robes and changed into a dark outer garment. A night breeze brushed past their faces, and the young men and women under the pear tree couldn't resist chattering after drinking their tea. Why is Dean Yun so angry? Duan Yu was curious and looked directly at his Jojo. His intuition told him that it was most likely the little stoic's credit that the dean was so angry. Oh, Jojo is so annoying. Qi Xianxian was full of admiration as she chattered. Jojo negotiated with Dean Yun and had him reduce the contribution points deducted from us during this holiday by half. Qi Xianxian drew a circle with her finger, indicating that everyone present would have their contribution points reduced by half. The dean told you to scram in the end. Duan Yu exclaimed with a wink. That's right. The little fatty smiled honestly. That's why we scrammed down. Everyone, Lu Yu twitched her mouth and kicked the fatty. No one will think you're mute if you don't speak. Let's go and prepare some ingredients. We'll eat roast beef tonight. That's right, Tianhua Academy came from Ming Province and specifically said that they want to have 100 matches with the Divine Province branch. Do you know about this? The little stoic nodded. The dean promised us that we can earn 2,000 contribution points for every match we win. We can win 10,000 contribution points if we win the team battle. Duan Yu looked dumbfoundedly at Lien, who was beside Jojo. When he saw the latter throw him a "imagine it yourself" look, he couldn't help but cough silently. This is also the result of Jojo's negotiation with Dean Yun. The little stoic's expressionless face was taut as she turned to walk towards her room in her court. She grumbled as she walked, so stingy. He's already so old, but he's still so calculative with a child. What's wrong with reducing contribution points by half? What's wrong with raising the price after winning? He was the one who racked his brains to call us back to save the day. Shouldn't you treat us better? He even said that I'm stingy. He's the stingy one. Everyone watched her leave, speechless. Ah, cough, cough. Xiao Xiao is actually quite stingy, little fatty said honestly. Jiang Shaoxin kicked his butt again. This guy really wants to die. The little fatty was dragged away with an aggrieved expression. That night, the group of people had a lively dinner in Donglin Garden to celebrate their first day back at the academy. After Prince Mo returned to his room, he hugged his wife lovingly. Jojo, let's go to the arena tomorrow and earn a few million contribution points. You won't have to worry about not having enough contribution points when you apply for leave in the future. The little stoic also thought the same. Contribution points weren't of much use to her. They were just used to offset her vacation. We can go together tomorrow. Our dear Mo rubbed his wife's head in satisfaction. He thought that he would immediately return to the weapon refining hall to refine weapons after returning to the academy and would be separated from Jojo during the day. Chapter 37:13. Just thinking about it made him sad. They were just newlyweds, and he could no longer stick to his Jojo. Being forced to separate from one spouse, that kind of feeling was really unbearable. Sir Jojo punched him on the head in annoyance. You're only separated during the day, but at night, you still have to return to Dong Lin Court together. Previously, she had thought that this guy was overthinking things. Mo Lien pursed his lips, and grabbed her little hand that was hitting him. Jojo, you hit your husband, and your husband's heart hurts. Arbor was angry and amused at the same time. She reached out and pinched his cheeks, making him make a funny face. You're so annoying. No, if you find me annoying now, what will happen in the future? Mo Lien reached out and rubbed her little face as he nagged. Xiao Mu couldn't resist snickering before bursting into laughter. Mo Lien supported his chin with one hand, and looked at his little wife with a smile. How happy, I feel that this little girl's smile is gradually becoming more frequent. The next morning, when the sun had just risen, the long-awaited sound of a broken basin rang out again. Students, the morning is the golden time of the day. It's time to wake up and train. Students. It takes about an hour to travel from Donglin Court to the Academy District. It's time to wake up, time to wake up, time to wake up. Qi Xianxian wore a nightcap and wandered out of the room like a ghost. She stared blankly at the kitchen maid for a long while before she could not help but shout, "There are no classes today." To be exact, there were no classes for the past few days. Since the dean had arranged for them to challenge, trample, Tianhua Academy, why would he be so stupid as to arrange classes for them to waste their time? The kitchen maid served up a big bowl of sumptuous food and continued to shout. No classes. That's great, quickly finish your breakfast and go into seclusion to train. Could this kitchen maid be the dean's secret spy, lying in ambush here to supervise their training? Why did it feel like he was so excited in the morning? He was even more excited than students like them. Little Fatty yawned as he walked out of the room. He moved a stool and sat beside Qi Xianxian. Xianxian, we're going to the arena today. She was so sleepy. She didn't know if it was because of the change of environment, but she felt that she didn't sleep well last night. In the past, when he rested in the little stoic spirit domain, it was a small space of its own without any noise to disturb him. When he woke up, he would feel that his spirit energy was abundant. Yesterday, when he slept in the side room, he felt too tired. Outside, the sky was full of noise. Early in the morning, he was knocked awake by a broken basin. After washing up, they felt a little better. After eating breakfast, his soul finally returned to its original position. Duan Yu had already changed into a neat school uniform in his room. When he pushed open the door and walked out, he was met with the gazes of his little companions. I'll go with you guys to take a look today. There was nothing to do in the room anyway, so it would be great to go over and watch the fun. He walked to the courtyard and sat beside the little stoic and Mo Lien, eating breakfast with them. Little Fatty and his group all wore the same white school uniform, and each of them appeared to be in high spirits. The little stoic took out a large red cloak from her inner world and put it on. She raised her hand and shouted, "Let's go," taking the lead to walk out the door. Everyone, Jojo put on a large red combat cloak. Chapter 37:14. This was the prelude to causing trouble. The little friends stared at Sir Jojo's back as he left, and their eyes lit up. Their Jojo was going to battle. What were they waiting for? At the same time, on the ethereal peak, a circle of bare stones was formed, forming a small courtyard. Principal Yun was sipping tea with a satisfied expression on his face. He was enjoying the spiritual tea that he had dug out from the little stoic girl when he suddenly looked up. He saw an old man with white hair and a long beard walking towards him with a smile on his face. Elder Ku, what brings you here for a chat today? Principal Yun raised his hand and invited the old man to sit down. Elder Ku stroked his beard and said with a smile, I have a lot of free time every day and there hasn't been much going on in the cultivation hall recently. Most of the matters are taken care of by the teachers and there is no need for me to step in. On the other hand, Dean, shouldn't you be very anxious? Why do you look so calm and collected? Why, has the matter with the Tianhua Academy been resolved? Yun Piaomiao snorted, although it hasn't been resolved, it's not far from being resolved. Oh. You're so confident. The old man muttered in a low voice and sized up Yun Piaomiao again. So, you found someone to deal with the Tianhua Academy students. Don't blame me for reminding you. The new batch of students from the Tianhua Academy are all top-notch. To be honest, the Tianhua Academy has really put in a lot of effort this time. I don't know where they got such a monstrous group of students to specially come and challenge our royal school. Among the seniors in the royal school for the past 2 years, I have never seen such outstanding students. Alright, stop praising others and diminishing our own morale. Principal Yun waved his hand and said, just wait for a good show later. The past few days had been terrible. Principal Yun had been extremely sullen. Ever since the bunch of bastards from the Tianhua Academy had come to challenge them, the principal had been extremely depressed. It was impossible for the royal school to not have any students who were not good enough to deal with their students. But the problem was that the other party's tutor had made it clear to them from the very beginning that this batch of new students were the freshmen that Tianhua Academy had just accepted this year. If Principal Yun had sent some older students who had been in the academy for 3 to 4 years to deal with this batch of new students, he would have already lost. Regardless of whether the Huatian Academy's teacher was speaking the truth, since the other party had said that they were new students from their academy, the royal school's team of new students naturally could not admit defeat. Dean Yun stood up in high spirits and walked out of the courtyard in large strides. Alright, it's time to go over and watch a good show. Today's weather was very good, so it was time for this dean to hold his head high. Elder Ku chuckled. With a hint of doubt and curiosity in his heart, he followed Dean Yun's footsteps and left Ethereal Peak, heading towards the arena area in the outer city. Today was the same as the previous 2 days. The betting area of the arena was already packed with people early in the morning. However, after a few consecutive matches where it was all one-sided, most of the people who had come to place their bets had bet on Tianhua Academy. Hence, even if they won the match, they would not earn much money and would only be able to join in the fun. Get out of the way. A large fat palm pushed the burly man who was blocking the way to the side as if he was carrying a chicken. The onlookers sucked in a breath of cold air, their eyes filled with astonishment. Chapter 37:15. The burly man who was being lifted up single-handedly had a large build. Based on his weight alone, he should be over 180 caddies. However, it looked like this person lifted him up effortlessly as though he was lifting a small chick. How could this not be shocking? It's His Excellency Gago. Waves of worshipful exclamations came from the crowd. The way ordinary people looked at high-level cultivators was truly as reverent as a god. With reverence on their faces, they subconsciously retreated to the sides, leaving a path in the middle that could allow 3 people to walk side by side. The man who was respectfully addressed as His Excellency Gago looked to be in the prime of his life. His muscular body was bulging with muscles. When he stood in the crowd, he was like a small hill that was several times wider and thicker than ordinary people. This Vice-Captain Gago came together with a beautiful woman. This beautiful woman with a snake-like figure was Tianhua Academy's captain, Nia Yaorao. Her seductive figure was delicate and boneless. The two of them had the highest cultivation levels among Tianhua Academy's new students. Nia Yaorao was a leveled 15 Great Spiritual Master who possessed a 9th level wood spirit. Meanwhile, Gago was a leveled 15 Great Spiritual Master who possessed a 9th level spiritual fire. These two people's cultivation levels could be said to have reached the peak of the spiritual realm. They were definitely among the top figures among the new students. Who will the Royal Academy send out to accept the challenge today? Following the captain and vice-captain were 15 Tianhua Academy students. The one who spoke was a youth with a head of glossy black hair and a disdainful gaze. Most of their cultivations were level 10 great spiritual masters and above. Even if they were placed in the Royal Academy, they would be considered dazzling rising stars among the new students. Biao Liang was a level 12 great spiritual master with an 8th level spiritual fire. His strength was second only to the two captains, and he held the position of a small strategist in the new students' team. The Royal Academy's people are here. Someone shouted loudly, and the crowd instantly became rowdy. It's the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince of the Divine Province is here. The eyes of the Duan family's third young master, Duan Tianya, brightened. He turned to look at the path that the crowd had opened up. Sure enough, he saw the Crown Prince's party walking over. The little stoic student expressionlessly walked at the front. Her academy uniform paired with a bright red ostentatious cape instantly attracted everyone's attention. Qin Jiu hastily squeezed out of the crowd and excitedly bounced around Duan Yu. Duan Yu, you're finally back. Hey, let me tell you, these 2 days, the people from Tianhua Academy have been really arrogant. We must teach them a lesson later. The robust man like a small mountain, Gao Xiu, turned his head, and his gaze landed on the delicate little stoic. He furrowed his brows for no reason. Tianhua Academy's new student team will not bully the weak and bully a little girl. Get a few sturdy ones to fight. Everyone looked at each other and subconsciously glanced at the sturdy Gato. If this guy looked down on the stoic-faced little crown princess like this, he was probably going to be in trouble later on. While he was thinking, he saw the little stoic, Prince Mo, Qi Xianxian, and the other 8 people had already leaped onto the stage. 9 people from the Divine Prefecture Branch challenge Huatia Academy's new student team, the little stoic said coldly. Enough nonsense. Send someone out and begin. What a joke. If they didn't beat up the 17 people from Tianhua Academy, how could they earn those 2,000 contribution points per round? Back then, they had agreed with the dean that they would get an additional 2,000 contribution points if they won a round. That was for all the team members. The little stoic looked at the 17 people as if she was looking at 34,000 contribution points. Chapter 37:16. This gaze carried a hint of naked judgment, causing Jie Su, who was opposite him, to feel his hair stand on end. He actually felt that the young lady in front of him was behaving strangely. How was that possible? This young lady looked like a little girl in her teens. Her hair was not even fully grown and she actually dared to challenge the Tianhua Academy. She was truly a newborn calf that was not afraid of a tiger. Arbor had just finished his sentence when Mata took a step forward and said with a smile, "Weren't the Tianhua Academy so full of themselves these past 2 days? Why are none of them daring to come up the stage to fight now?" One of the Tianhua Academy's students immediately stepped forward. But he was stopped by a middle-aged man with a green scar on his face. "Hey, don't be so anxious. Before the competition, let's set the rules first." This middle-aged man with a green scar was the teacher who had brought the students from the Tianhua Academy to the royal school to cause trouble. His slender eyes were shining with a cunning light. He squinted his eyes and carefully sized up Arbor, Mo Lien and the rest. These few people gave him a feeling that something was not right. It was as if there was an invisible pressure surrounding them. But looking at their age and the spiritual energy that they exuded, they did not seem to have a high level of cultivation. "My little friends from the Divine Academy, how do you intend to compete? Is it a one-on-one battle or a group battle?" The teacher with the green scar on his face laughed and said, "If it is a group battle, the Tianhua Academy will not take advantage of you. We will send out people with the same number of people as you to battle. Qi Xian, little fatty, and the others looked at each other and winked at each other. The little fatty, Ko Hongwen, took a few steps forward and gave a kind and friendly smile, saying, "Fellow students from the Huatian Academy, you have come from afar and are trying your best to invite us to a friendly spar. The new students from the Divine Academy of the Royal School will naturally do our best to cooperate." Everyone rolled their eyes at the same time. Fatty's words were quite funny. Everyone knew that the Tianhua Academy had come to provoke the Royal School. What did Fatty want to cooperate with them for? Should we work together to beat them up? The scarred instructor was obviously very satisfied with the Fatty's compliments. He smiled and said, "Since both of us don't have any big problems, let's have a friendly one-on-one challenge. What do you all think?" "All right." The students of the Tianhua Academy roared in unison, their voices shaking the heavens as they eagerly responded to their mentor. The little stoic impatiently rolled her eyes. A load of nonsense. If you want to fight, then let's fight. What's the point of talking so much nonsense before fighting? Mo Lien could not help but chuckle. Be patient, Jojo. They won't have a chance to talk later. Let's be considerate of others. Arbor thought that was right. He secretly took out the storage talisman in his inner world and prepared to fight at any time. Let my husband take the first round. Mo Lien patted her little head and said. Arbor blinked and nodded reluctantly. All right, then be careful. Qi Xian, Ma Ta, and the rest instantly looked at Arbor and Mo Lien strangely. The little crown princess actually asked His Highness the Crown Prince to be careful. They understood. Wasn't she just asking His Highness the Crown Prince to hold back his strength and not kill them all at once? Chapter 37:17. Since it is a one-on-one match, for the sake of fairness, we will send out the same 8 members as your Royal Academy's Divine Lands team. No need. Ma Ta immediately waved his hand and rejected the leader's words. He laughed and said, "The Tianhua Academy is a guest from afar. As the host, we must do our best to let our guests come happily and leave satisfied." What a joke, with 9 less people, wouldn't they lose a lot of contribution points? Of course they couldn't just let them pass. The leader with the scar on his face was taken aback, but he laughed and nodded. Since the students of the Divine Lands Academy are so confident, then all right. Let our Tianhua Academy's 17 people experience your skills one by one. Don't cry when the time comes. He had wanted to leave them some face, but after a battle, their spiritual power would be almost completely depleted. These people actually dared to challenge 17 people with just 9 people. That meant that 8 of them would have to fight twice. The leader with the scar on his face looked at the little fatty and the rest, a cold smile on his face. Since the rules of the competition are a one-on-one fair duel, you are not allowed to summon your spiritual beasts, use poisons, hidden weapons and other supplementary items. During the competition, you are allowed to use elixirs such as spiritual rejuvenation elixirs. Do you have any objections to this? The little fatty and the rest shook their heads in unison. The leader with the scar on his face smiled. Before each round, there are 3 minutes to choose the members. After 3 minutes, if no decision is made, it will be taken as a forfeit. Everyone nodded again. The leader with the scar on his face smiled satisfactorily. These are the rules for now. Do you have anything else to add? After the one-on-one match, we will proceed to a group battle. Sir Jojo said expressionlessly. You can choose 8 members from the 17 who are in the best condition to battle with us. What a joke, 10,000 contribution points per person, it would be a waste not to earn it. This time, they had to earn as much as they could to prevent their contribution points from going into the negatives every few days. They also had to face the ridiculous mission of going to the Great Forest to train for a month. A strange look appeared on the scarred face leader's face. After pondering for a moment, he exchanged glances with the Enchanting Beauty leader. After exchanging glances, they nodded and said, "All right. Let's do as this young friend says." Arbor, Little Fatty, and the others jumped off the stage one after another, leaving a large space on the stage. Prince Mo stood there expressionlessly, waiting for the Tianhua Academy's students to arrive. This guy did not have the shame of a transcendent god bullying a small fry at all. His face was indifferent, and no one could tell from his expression at all. Duan Yu glanced at him and couldn't resist silently spitting at this guy. In terms of the level of shamelessness in the world, if this guy claimed to be second, no one would dare to claim first. That old fool with a scarred face from the Tianhua Academy kept saying that for the sake of fairness, he wanted to have a fair one-on-one match with the Divine Prefecture Branch Academy. Who knew that the person in front of them was not a spirit realm or deity realm freshman, but a transcendent realm? Even Duan Yu had to admit that this guy's strength was probably just a smidgen higher than his. If he was not mistaken, this guy's true strength was about to break through to the late Hierarch realm. Chapter 37:18. This guy's cultivation speed was truly very strange and abnormal. Previously at the Red River Canyon, he was probably only at the late stage of the Venerable Immortal Realm, possibly not even at the peak stage. That was why they were somewhat helpless against the Temple Master of the Temple of the Gods at that time. However, they didn't expect that this guy's cultivation would soar by leaps and bounds in just a few short months. This was definitely related to the Mo Lien seal in his body. It was just that this guy usually hid it rather well and didn't say anything. Although Duan Yu didn't say anything, he already sensed that this guy's Mo Lien seal might be the type that would become stronger in the later stages of undoing it. Once the seal was undone, his cultivation would increase even more rapidly in the later stages. However, this would also cause his cultivation to be unstable and his cultivation to be false. This guy would probably have to enter seclusion for a while to stabilize his cultivation. At this time, a female member of the Huatian Academy had already leaped onto the stage. Her gaze was somewhat blatantly sizing up Mo Lien, and her eyes revealed some interest. The man in front of her was very outstanding, so she really couldn't bear to be ruthless. This female member smiled coquettishly at Prince Mo, and there seemed to be a faint glow blossoming from the corners of her eyes. "Little big brother, you have to be careful. This little sister also doesn't want to hurt you." The woman threw Prince Mo a tender and sweet look. However, what annoyed her was that this young man in front of her didn't even look at her out of the corner of his eye. He just stood there nonchalantly, and his entire body was full of openings. It was as if the moment she made a move, the other party would immediately collapse. This woman's brows creased slightly, and she immediately summoned a tasseled feather fan from her inner world. Raising her body, she pounced towards Prince Mo at a speed comparable to a streak of light. This punk was so arrogant, so she would let him suffer a little so that he wouldn't always be so condescending. The feather fan in the woman's hand instantly transformed into a sharp blade, aiming straight for Mo Lien's chest. With a slash of this spirit weapon, the woman was confident that she could leave a mark on the man in front of her. A mark. The woman who attacked suddenly widened her eyes in midair. There was no other reason. The man who was standing upright slightly raised his hand and waved his sleeve. Her body flew out uncontrollably, and the feather fan in her hand flew out of her hand and landed in the man's hand. Everyone below the stage couldn't help but gasp. Under Prince Mo's gentle pinch, the feather fan turned into a pile of scrap metal and fell to the ground with a rustling sound. To be able to crush a spirit weapon with just one hand, what kind of cultivation was this? Everyone looked at the man in the ring with fear in their eyes. To be honest, this was the first time they had seen the Crown Prince display his true strength in front of others. Normally, there would be no chance for the Crown Prince to do this. Whoever dared to cause trouble in front of His Highness had already been dealt with by the Shadow Guards. Moreover, in the Academy, other than those in Dragonflame City who were more familiar with the Crown Prince, a portion of people only knew that the Crown Prince was brilliant in weapon refinement, but they didn't know that his cultivation had also reached an unparalleled level. With a wave of his sleeve, he sent that female member flying out like trash. At this moment, everyone's gaze was focused on the flustered female member with a flushed face. Chapter 37:19. The pitiful woman was smashed into the arena with her body, creating a human-shaped crater. After a long time, the woman finally crawled out of the crater. Her face was a mix of green and black, white and yellow, and was extremely beautiful. Damn it, I didn't even manage to touch the corner of the other party's clothes before I was directly swatted away like a fly. Facing such a delicate and beautiful woman, this man actually dared to do such a cruel thing. What an unromantic guy. That female team member supported her waist and groaned as she climbed up from the ground. Her pair of seductive eyes were red as she opened her mouth. This little brother, you're too ruthless. Prince Emo still did not even look at her. From the moment this woman went up on stage and used her lousy seduction techniques on him, Emo Lien had already thought of how to deal with her. Seeing that she was struggling to stand up, Prince Emo directly stretched out a finger and tapped the air in the direction of the woman's head. Bam! The female team member from Tianhua Academy only felt a majestic and mighty aura rush towards her, instantly sending her flying. The woman once again fell into the human-shaped pit that she had formed earlier. She was a little dumbfounded after being smashed. For a long time, she didn't realize that she had been sent flying again. Furthermore, she had been sent flying with just a lift of a finger. What did this mean? This meant that she could not even withstand a lift of a finger from the opponent. The faces of the teachers and students from Tianhua Academy all changed as they looked sharply at the young man in the middle of the arena. From the start to the end, this person did not even take half a step. He only waved his sleeves and lifted his finger. The female team member from Tianhua Academy was smashed into the crater and could not crawl back up. Scarface's expression changed as he raised his head to look in Emo Lien's direction. He opened his mouth several times but did not say anything. In the end, it was Tianhua Academy's team leader, Nia Yaorao, who waved her hand and had two team members go up to the arena to pull out their own team member from the crater. Only then did this one-sided farce come to an end. When everyone saw the female team member being pulled out of the pit, their eyes involuntarily revealed a trace of sorrow. This unlucky woman's entire face was almost flattened. Her nose and mouth were crooked, and saliva was dripping from her mouth uncontrollably. She was completely crushed to the point that her eyes and mouth were crooked. Nia Yaorao glanced at Emo Lien gravely, her eyes throbbing with fury. The first battle between Tianhua Academy and the Royal Academy had ended in such a bizarre manner. It had to be said that the faces of the teachers and students of Tianhua Academy had been completely disgraced. But in reality, if they knew Emo Lien's true cultivation level, they probably wouldn't feel embarrassed. They would only look down on Prince Emo for bullying the weak. Shameless to the extreme, Emo Lien jumped down from the arena and walked through his wife's side with a grin. "Wife, isn't your husband awesome?" Arbor nodded her little head. Her husband had used such an effortless method to crush the people from Tianhua Academy. In that instant, the atmosphere of the battle had reached a boiling point. The Royal Academy students who had been sullen for the past few days were now clamoring for Tianhua Academy to quickly send their second team member up to the arena. The leader with the scarred face chuckled and waved his hand with a cold face. Chapter 37:20. Deputy Captain Gagu's sturdy figure that resembled a small mountain shuffled forward a couple of times. Suddenly, his entire body flew into the air like a mountain and crashed into the center of the stage with a loud rumble. Thankfully, this outer city stage was built with limestone and was very sturdy. Even if it was pressed down by this mountain, it didn't budge at all. Gaga patted the bulging muscles on his arms and roared at the Royal Academy students below the stage. This roar was like the roar of a beast, causing the Royal School students who were in an uproar to immediately shut their mouths. Everyone looked at each other in dismay, feeling that this Deputy Captain Gagu was especially like a wild beast. Everyone's gazes landed on Prince Mo and company again, anticipating that Prince Mo would go on stage and crush him again, making this roaring brat piss his pants in terror as he scurried off the stage. Mo Lien couldn't be bothered with those people's gazes. He lowered his head to look at his wifey and asked with a grin, "How about it? Do you want to go up and fight, or will hubby do it for you?" Arbor rolled up his small sleeves and turned his small head to glance at him. "I'll go meet him." "Younger sister. Younger sister." Mu Xingchen impatiently squeezed through the crowd and came to the little stoic side. "Eldest brother, you're back too." Arbor glanced at Mu Xingchen and didn't mention the Mu family's lousy matter at all. That old geezer Chaoyang still wanted to push the blame for the mess to Sir Jojo. Bah, he was dreaming. Mu Xingchen nodded and then glanced at the small mountain man on stage. He frowned and said, "Younger sister, you're going up to fight this person. His cultivation is a level 15 great spiritual master, and it looks like his 5 spirits aren't weak either. You look pitiful with your small arms and legs. It's simply too heart-wrenching for you to go up and fight with this Iron Tower-like man." As he spoke, Mu Xingchen kept glancing at Mo Lien, Duan Muqing, and company. His gaze was filled with eerie disdain. What he meant was, you men actually didn't volunteer to fight, and actually wanted your sister to deal with such a burly man. "Big brother, don't worry. This guy looks huge, but Jojo will send him flying with a slap." Xiao Mu patted her eldest brother's arm and solemnly raised her small chin, gesturing with her pinky finger. "Isn't it just a little mosquito?" Everyone looked at Motzi Gapo, who was standing on the stage, and looked at each other speechlessly. Can Jojo really send that naga flying? Mu Xingchen looked at Duan Yu and Mo Lien in confusion. Both of them gave him a helpless look at the same time. 2 minutes later, everyone saw Lord Jojo's slender figure fly up into the sky with a whoosh. After Gago's punch, the little guy was sent flying backward like a small cannonball. With a bang, he was sent flying by someone. After seeing this scene, the scarred instructor's expression became slightly better. It seemed that he could regain all the face that he had lost in the previous match. However, just as this thought formed in his mind, the scarred instructor's expression instantly changed. Disbelief flickered in his eyes as he looked at Arbor, who appeared in front of Gago in a second. What was going on? With the distance this guy flew, it was impossible for her to reach this lightning-like speed even if she leaped down from such a high altitude. Without another word, the little stoic also followed up with a punch, directly colliding with Gago's thick and solid fist. Chapter 37-21. Jojo is mighty. As Jojo's loyal fan and #1 bestie, our dear Qi Xianxian selectively ignored the fact that Jojo was sent flying earlier. She instantly jumped up in excitement and raised her fists as she roared, cheering for her Sir Jojo. In the next second, this little thing flew out again at a very bizarre speed and shot up into the sky. Everyone only saw this fellow's figure skimming through the clouds before disappearing with a whoosh. Duan Yu pursed his lips and couldn't resist covering his handsome face. "Sorry, Sir Jojo." He wanted to laugh a little. Mu Xingchen, earlier, younger sister, had solemnly vowed that Gaia was merely a mosquito and that she could send him flying with a casual slap. In the end, the one who was sent flying twice in a row was younger sister. Mo Lien. Prince Mo had nothing to say about his wife's actions. He had to use all his strength to stifle his laughter. Only then could he prevent himself from bursting into unrestrained laughter in front of everyone. He absolutely couldn't laugh at his wife, especially not in front of Duanyu. Otherwise, he would be in trouble when he got home. With Duanyu's vile character and his ability to take advantage of every opening, he would definitely make up all sorts of bad things about him in front of Sir Jojo. Humph. He wasn't stupid, so how could he make this kind of mistake? Pfft. At this time, a discordant burst of laughter instantly attracted everyone's attention. Qi Xianxian and the others simultaneously glared at the laughing fellow with angry gazes. After the little fatty warrior laughed fearlessly, he even added, "Jojo is so funny. Don't you all laugh?" It was indeed funny. Every time this little thing was sent flying, she would use a teleportation talisman to teleport in front of Gaia. Then she would be sent flying with a punch. Mu Xingqian twitched his mouth and glared at the little fatty. What's so funny? It's not funny at all. No, he had to hold it in on the other side. After Sir Jojo was sent flying 3 times in a row, Gaia's expression also changed in shock. Wasn't this little girl a little too abnormal? With his speed and gravity, even if someone weaker than him wasn't seriously injured, they would at least spit out 2 mouthfuls of blood. However, there was no change in expression on the little girl's stoic face, as if nothing had happened. He had clearly seen her being punched into the air by him time and time again, so why was she able to appear in front of him in the blink of an eye with such a strange and abnormal speed? He didn't know that someone had used the teleportation talisman several times in a row. Every time, he would teleport in front of him at the speed of light to receive the next strike. This was because Lord Jojo was a little excited to find that every time their fists collided and she was sent flying, the spiritual energy in her body would surge violently. When outsiders couldn't see it, the bones inside her body were cracking. Her body had already reached the peak of the half-step immortal bone state, so she was almost completely immune to the attacks of a level 10 spiritual master and below. Now, she was transforming into the immortal bone state. As long as she entered the immortal bone state, even if a level 5 or level 6 God Master came, it would be difficult to hurt Jojo, let alone a level 15 spiritual master in front of her. When Lord Jojo was sent flying by Gaia for the first time, he discovered this shocking change. Chapter 37:22. As long as she circulated her spiritual energy in accordance with this force, her body would gradually undergo a rapid transformation. Not only was she transforming into an immortal bone, what was even more comical was that her previously stagnant minor realm was also starting to loosen. She seemed, perhaps, to be advancing towards the peak of level 14 Great Spiritual Master Realm. It didn't take long for her to advance from level 14 Great Spiritual Master Realm to gradual accomplishment, initial accomplishment, and phenomenal accomplishment, but she was now inexplicably about to step into the peak realm. Sir Jojo suddenly stood in front of Gappo and shouted at him, "Continue. Continue. Continue what?" Everyone couldn't resist glaring at this oddball in front of them. Continue to be beaten? Continue to ascend. How much did he deserve a beating? Gappo's complexion was also terrible to the extreme. He continuously punched out 3 times, and each punch consumed a large amount of spiritual energy. It wasn't like he was just punching for fun. Big sister, this was going to consume spiritual energy, alright? After 3 punches, he felt that he didn't have enough energy to continue, so he could only pause on the spot and pant slightly. His body was like a small hill, and his bulging muscles were exposed. At this moment, it seemed as if they were drenched by the rain, as beads of sweat seeped out. The little stoic started to get impatient after waiting for 3 seconds. Why wasn't this guy attacking? Hurry and continue to punch. Her immortal bone transformation was only a few steps away. According to her conjecture, she would definitely advance if she punched him 3 more times. Roar! Gappo bellowed angrily, his tiger-like eyes glaring as he concentrated his energy into his dantian. He tightly clenched his fists that were the size of copper alms bowls, and he suddenly roared, "Take this!" Everyone watched as his bulging body rose from the ground, and the bulging muscles on his arms bulged. His 2 punches directly struck out, forming a blazing hurricane. As if a storm had descended, the world spun, and it crashed toward the little stoic. "Jojo!" Qi Xianxian cried out in alarm, and her eyes instantly widened. She wanted to rush onto the stage with a step. The little fatty was sharp-eyed and deft, and he hastily pulled her back. "Little great aunt, don't mess things up." He kept feeling that Sir Jojo was probably holding back and brewing some big move. Otherwise, how could he be beaten to the sky time and time again? Little fatty clearly felt that he had guessed the truth, especially when he saw Mo Lian, Mu Xingqian, and the others beside him. They were calm and did not look like they were going to rush forward to help. He was even more certain that he had guessed correctly. With His Highness the Crown Prince's protectiveness of the young Crown Princess, if the little stoic was truly in danger, how could the Crown Prince sit idly by? On the other side, Jojo was instantly enveloped by the fiery dragon-like hurricane. His entire body was shrunk in a ball of fire. After being hammered by Gato, he was once again sent flying into the sky. Her slender body was so small and pitiful in front of Gato, who was as strong as a mountain. The onlookers couldn't bear to look and covered their eyes. Someone even let out a long sigh. During the freshman's opening ceremony, the Crown Princess beat the barbarian tribe like a dog. Sure enough, it's because her spiritual beast is powerful. That's right. Several people nodded and discussed in low voices. Back then, the Crown Princess was truly frightening. She relied on a giant sand scorpion king to beat the crap out of that barbarian tribe student. But now, putting aside the spiritual beast's might, the young Crown Princess was at her wit's end against this iron tower of a man. Gato also breathed a sigh of relief. At least, this little lady didn't appear in front of him like a ghost again. Chapter 37-23. To be honest, every time she appeared beside him like a ghost, he felt a lot of pressure. Earlier, he had used 100% of his strength to envelop her with 9 layers of spirit fire and flung her away. From the looks of it, he should be the winner of this match. Gaia turned to look below the stage and said to his scarred mentor, "Mentor, you should be able to announce the results of the match." The scarred mentor nodded in satisfaction and said with a beaming smile, "I announce that in the second round of the one-on-one finals between the Royal Academy and Tianhua Academy, my Gaia from Tianhua Academy wins. Did you win?" A voice suddenly sounded behind Gaia. Everyone was shocked. Gaia also hurriedly sucked in a breath and turned around to see the little stoic who had suddenly appeared behind him. "How did you?" Gaia looked at the little girl in front of him in shock and looked up at the sky. A golden sun was faintly discernible above the blue sky. He had clearly sent her flying, all right. Why did this girl appear beside him without a sound every time? "You used a teleportation talisman." The scarred mentor belatedly exclaimed. "You used a talisman? What a joke." Mu Xingqian coldly interrupted the mentor and said, "We are from a talisman patrician family. Could it be that we can't even use talismans? You are a young lady from the Mu clan of the Divine Province." The scarred mentor exclaimed in shock. "What, this Tianhua Academy mentor, you aren't going to say that our Jojo used a talisman to cheat, right?" Qi Xianxian harumphed and preemptively said, "I'm telling you. The previous series of rules were all set by you guys. At that time, you didn't say that talismans couldn't be used. You only said that poison couldn't be used, right?" The scarred mentor was only slightly shocked and didn't mean to say that Arbor used a talisman against the rules. Now that he was reprimanded by Qi Xianxian, he couldn't help but smile wryly and shake his head. I didn't mean it that way. Since we have already agreed on the rules, there is naturally no reason to change them now. The mentor coughed awkwardly. Tianhua Academy still cared about their reputation and couldn't go back on their word under the noses of the outer court students. Arbor glanced at the black-faced Gato, raised his small fist, and said expressionlessly, "It's my turn. You were very happy when you punched this Lord Qiao into the sky, right? Now, I'll let you take 3 punches from Jojo, Sama." As soon as Arbor's words fell, a small fist immediately smashed towards Garbo's chest. Previously, every time he was sent flying, he could feel the spiritual energy in his meridians circulating vigorously. That was why he was given the opportunity to hit her. Humph. Now, it was time to get back at them. Arbor's fist landed and spirit force surged out. This caused Jie Su, who was already a bit exhausted, to be shocked. He subconsciously crossed his arms in front of his chest and welcomed the little girl's heavy blow. Bang! After a muffled sound, Gaho felt his entire body tremble slightly. His body was pushed by a fierce force, and his feet brushed against the ground of the arena as he moved backwards. In the eyes of outsiders, this scene was simply a bit comical. It was as if they were looking at a small, sturdy mountain that was suddenly pushed back several meters with a punch. Gaho's body was so strong, but he actually moved back a distance of more than 3 meters from the little stoic's punch. Chapter 37-24. And it wasn't over yet. After the little stoic punched him, she flew forward again with a trace of excitement on her face. She gathered spiritual energy in her left hand, clenched her fingers into a fist, and punched Geru's chest again. Boom! Boom boom! After 5 fierce punches, Geru, who only had the strength to defend himself, was pushed to the edge of the stage by the little stoic's repeated punches. The audience was already dead silent, and everyone stared dumbly at this scene. Ha! The stoic face was truly formidable. Looking at her hammering Gakuo, it was as if she was looking at a small ant pushing up a large mountain. This kind of visual contrast really made people curse in their hearts. In the blink of an eye, the little girl suddenly leaped into the air and flew behind Geru, punching him toward the center of the stage. Originally, if the little girl punched him again, Geru would fall off the stage and lose without a doubt. Unexpectedly, the little girl punched him to the other side of the stage. This stage was very large, with a distance of more than 50 meters from the left side to the right side. This way, Geru would have to suffer more than a dozen punches from the little stoic. The spectators couldn't help but shed tears of sympathy for Geru. Just how much did the little girl dislike him that she would treat him like a doll and beat him here and there on the stage? With this in mind, everyone looked at Geru with sympathetic gazes. Yet at this moment, everyone suddenly discovered a strong light burst out from the little girl's body, connecting heaven and earth, practically blotting out the sun. The spiritual energy in the surroundings converged from all directions. This spiritual energy of heaven and earth was extremely pure and seemed to emit an endless power. It wrapped around Arbor and encircled her entire body. The entire venue sunk into a dead silence. Even the little stoic's teammates couldn't resist opening their mouths, but they immediately shut their mouths in silence. Mu Xingchen's eyes lit up as he looked at his younger sister on the stage. He really didn't expect that his younger sister would advance just by purely competing with someone in spiritual energy. Because it was only a small realm advancement, Arbor advanced very quickly this time. Moreover, she was already prepared beforehand and followed the method of advancing quickly. As for stabilizing her realm, it wouldn't be too late to do it later. A quarter of an hour later, Xiaomu slowly walked out from a spiritual energy vortex. Her clear eyes gazed coldly at Geru. Although the latter was a bit surprised, he still steadied his emotions and stared at her with a complicated gaze. I only lost because I underestimated my opponent. Geru stubbornly finished this sentence. Suddenly, he discovered that countless green vines had sprung out around him and surrounded him at an extremely terrifying speed. The vines suddenly hugged together, and dozens of vines that were as thick as the mouth of a bowl instantly hugged GA2 in the center. Gato was taken aback. He couldn't help but roar. Countless flames rose around his body. He wanted to use the power of fire spirit to tear the vines around his body into ashes. However, it didn't have the slightest effect. His fire spirit actually didn't have the slightest effect on the vines around him. Geru abruptly turned his head, and his eyes widened to the size of copper bells. He shouted almost hysterically, what did you do? Ignorant and ill-informed. Arbor coldly swept that man a glance with a hint of mockery in her expression. Chapter 37-25. Gato, you've lost. Hurry and admit defeat. Captain Nia Yaorao said indifferently as she twisted her body slightly. As an outsider, she clearly knew that Gato had lost completely. Don't underestimate the little girl's slender arms and legs. Her wood spiritual energy was actually able to restrain Gato's 9th level spiritual fire. What did this mean? This meant that the little girl's wood spiritual energy was clearly higher than the 9th level. What would a wood spiritual energy higher than the 9th level be? When she thought of this, Nia Yaorao couldn't help but look apprehensively at the stupefied little crown princess, and her gaze involuntarily flickered. She took a step forward, twisted her waist, and curtsied. Crown princess, your wood spiritual energy is very powerful. I want to compete with you in the next round. Are you willing? Nia Yaorao asked this to seek Arbor's opinion. After all, under normal circumstances, Arbor could reject her challenge. After all, he had just gone through a battle and logically should rest for a while. There was no reason to accept your challenge of a tag team battle, right? However, Arbor glanced at this female captain and suddenly nodded. Come. She agreed. This time, even the beautiful captain couldn't help but be somewhat puzzled. Could it be that this little crown princess was so conceited about her own strength that she thought she could win consecutive battles and crush the entire Tian Academy? In reality, Nia Yaorao was really overthinking things. The little stoic didn't think that much at all. The little stoic was willing to accept the challenge because she could tell that this Tian Academy female captain also had a fresh and refined wood spiritual energy on her. The wood spiritual energy that this female captain possessed probably wasn't of a low level. The little stoic was a bit interested in the wood spiritual energy in this female captain's body and wanted to compete with her. That was all. Nia Yaorao gazed deeply at Arbor before flying onto the stage. Meanwhile, the blue-scarred instructor's expression was already extremely unsightly. He reached out to say something to Nia Yaorao, but he didn't manage to do so in time. Nia Yaorao had already entered the stage, so the blue-scarred instructor could only silently close his mouth and frown slightly. Crown Princess, be careful. Nia Yaorao muttered in a low voice, and the wood spirit in her hand rose sharply. Countless vines instantly drilled out from under her feet and coiled around her as they rushed towards Arbor. Arbor's eyes lit up. This guy's control of the wood spirit was very skillful. If it wasn't for him, he would have had a good chance of winning. With a thought, Nia Yaorao's figure rapidly moved, and she quickly closed in on her. She pulled on the vines with one hand and shot in front of Arbor in a matter of minutes. Her fist was wrapped in dense wood spirit intent, and she punched directly in front of Arbor. While Nia Yao was still in midair, a powerful force swooped down, bringing with it the sound of the wind. Arbor raised his head to look at her. A thin layer of transparent, watercolored spirit armor instantly covered her entire body. A full-body spiritual armor was formed in 0.01 seconds. This caused an uproar below the ring. Scary, this is a full-body spiritual armor. Seeing Nia Yarao's attack being effortlessly blocked by Qiao Mu's full-body spiritual armor, everyone was flabbergasted at once. The blue-scarred instructor instantly jumped up and yelled with all his might, "Yao Rao! She has wood and water dual attributes." Nia Yao Rao clearly already knew. Why did the instructor need to remind her? Chapter 37-26. When Nia Yao Rao saw Arbor generate a watercolor transparent full-body spiritual armor in an instant, she knew that the little girl's water spiritual power was probably not low. Her expression instantly turned grave, and tiny beads of sweat seeped out of her forehead. Since joining Tianhua Academy, this was the first time she felt pressured by an opponent to the point that she almost couldn't breathe. Moreover, the opponent was such a young little girl. Nia Yao Rao took a deep breath and abruptly clenched her fist, summoning a flying sword from her inner world. Wrapped in wood spiritual power, it shot straight towards Arbor. However, it was blocked by Arbor's startled swan in an instant. Everyone's eyes flickered as they saw the tiny startled swan fighting inextricably with Nia Yarao's flying sword in midair. Furthermore, startled swan was extremely ferocious and clearly understood its master's intentions. It practically didn't need to be controlled, and with a thought, it would bore out from a tricky angle and directly attack Nia Yarao's flying sword. Clang clang, clang clang clang. Following the collision of the two short blades, a crisp sound rang out. Arbor abruptly moved again. However, she suddenly summoned a treasured sword brimming with purple light and flashing with lightning. She held it in her hand and lightly leaped up. Nia Yarao's eyes flashed with shock, and she retreated almost reflexively. She didn't expect that the little stoic could actually divide her attention to summon a treasured sword to continue fighting with her while using her spiritual conscience to control the startled swan dagger. Nia Yao Rao questioned herself. With her spiritual conscience, it was simply impossible for her to reach this level. Controlling a flying sword required her full concentration and all of her spiritual conscience, so how could she possibly have the time to fight with someone in actual combat? Just in terms of spiritual conscience, she was already far too inferior to the other party. It was simply impossible for her to contend with her. Nia Yao Rao simply didn't know that the little stoic wasn't using spiritual conscience to control startled swan dagger, but divine conscience. Level 5 divine conscience was the state that the little stoic had just attained. Therefore, she also really wanted to try out what benefits it would bring to her battle after her divine conscience advanced. The little girl had completely treated Nia Yao Rao as an evenly matched opponent, and had completely forgotten that Nia Yarao's spiritual sense was several times weaker than her own. When she used her divine sense to mobilize graceful grace to intercept her opponent's flying sword, she very decisively took out the thunderclap sword. He planned to try out the second move of the Nine Heavens Lightning Sword technique, 1000 Lightning Phantoms. Nine Heavenly Lightning Sword technique second move, 1000 Lightning Phantoms. After this move was used, it automatically generated 1000 lightning rays which transformed into sword images. These sword images carried the power of lightning that couldn't be penetrated by 10,000 men as they swooped down from the sky and directly chopped towards Nia Yao Rao in the center of the stage. The scarred instructor below the arena jumped up on the spot and shouted, "Please show mercy." At this moment, Nia Yao Rao also sensed great danger approaching. Her entire body instantly tightened, and a layer of wood spirit defensive cover wrapped around her body. However, the might of the Nine Heavens Lightning Sword technique was simply too great. On top of that, the Thunderclap sword was a sacred artifact. Effortlessly breaking through Nia Yao Rao's defenses was practically completed in an instant. When this sword strike landed on Nyayara's body, not to mention a mere level 15 great spiritual cultivator like her, even if there were 3 to 5 level 6 or level 7 divine cultivators, they probably wouldn't be able to withstand this strike. Nyayara was finished. This thought simultaneously popped up in everyone's minds in fright. Chapter 37:27. If such a sword's might landed on the body of a rank 15 great spirit master, wouldn't he be thoroughly finished? Just as everyone looked regretfully at Nyayara, thinking that she was about to turn into ashes, the 1,000 lightning bolts suspended in the air suddenly paused. Just like that, they paused in midair under everyone's gazes. Nyayara reflexively stretched out her hands to block in front of her. At this moment, when he raised his head slightly, he saw that the dense illusory sword lights were right in front of him. It was as if they had been frozen, and they were all hanging outside his defensive barrier. The little stoic expressionlessly clenched her fist, and all of the spiritual energy she released was obediently under her control. This scene would be extremely shocking to anyone who saw it. Nyayara never knew that sword moves and spiritual energy could actually be stopped after they were released. And in the blink of an eye, under Sir Jojo's forceful clench, these 1,000 sword shadows actually turned into faint starlight fragments and abruptly disappeared into the air. Whoosh! At this moment, the crowd below the arena erupted into a series of roars at almost the same time. Heavens, what did I see just now? The crown princess pushed aside the sword intent she released. Jojo's sword art is truly too impressive, Qi Xianxian muttered to herself. It's more than impressive. The little fellow's grasp of the sword art has simply reached the point of perfection, and she can release and withdraw it as she pleases. Duan Yu praised with a faint smile. The comprehension of the sword art was ever-changing in the blink of an eye. Sir Jojo could actually make the 1,000 sword shadows, which were so powerful, stop in midair and even make them vanish like bubbles in an instant. This kind of control over the sword and spiritual energy, among all the people present, probably only those at the transcendent god realm and above dared to claim that they had such godlike control. The cheers inside and outside the stage didn't dissipate for a long time. Everyone's breathing quickened, and their complexions flushed. They felt an indescribable sense of satisfaction. Watching the little lady fight truly made people feel too contented. From the little lady's attack to the end of the battle, it was actually merely a matter of 15 minutes. It was over. The battle was completely over. Nyayara slightly opened her eyes and slowly put down her hands that were blocking in front of her eyes. The woman's pupils shrank as she looked at the ground around her. Although the thousands of sword shadows did not penetrate her body and extinguish her soul remembrance, she was still able to control her soul. However, the frightening thing was that these sword intents had already pierced through the ground beneath her feet. At this time, other than the flat ground where she was standing, the ground around her had already become riddled with holes and spider web-like marks. If this sword really came down, Nyayara didn't dare to imagine. The difference between him and the little girl was like heaven and earth. Nyayara took a deep breath. When she looked at the little stoic before her, her gaze changed slightly, and her expression was extremely solemn. At this time, the little stoic had already landed lightly on the ground. She put away the startled swan dagger that had suddenly returned to her hand after a long cry in the air. The entire dagger was enveloped in a faint halo of light, and it clanged restlessly in Chow Mu's hand. Arbor's eyes brightened slightly, and he suddenly fed it a drop of blood with a flick of his finger. The entire dagger immediately released a strong light in her hand, and it seemed to break through the day in an instant. It suddenly slashed open the horizon with a fierce force. Chapter 37:28. The little stoic was slightly shocked. At this moment, the crowd had sunk into a deathly stillness. The startled swan dagger had always existed in her conscious in the form of a spirit weapon. However, it was very intelligent and had always been able to communicate with her mind. She didn't expect that after so many years of experience, a drop of her blood would actually break open the seal on its surface, causing it to suddenly advance into a divine weapon. What was originally a faint layer of silver light had now transformed into a faint golden light, instantly blinding the eyes of everyone present. Ha! The little girl advanced in the battle just now. This wasn't strange at all. What was strange was that the spirit weapon the little girl summoned from her conscious also advanced along with the little girl's advancement in this instant. Right, this was the logic, right? Arbor stood in the center of the arena with an indifferent expression. Suddenly, a giant veil of light emerged from her body. The spectators felt that they might have gone crazy, right? Otherwise, why would the little girl look like she was about to advance again? Xiao Qiao has advanced. Qi Xianxian, who was expressionless, suddenly said. Little Fatty turned around and glanced at her. He felt like laughing. He felt that when Xianxian said this, her expression was very similar to Jojo's stoic face. That kind of lifeless expression made the little fatty think that Xuanxuan's current mood definitely wasn't as tranquil as she appeared on the surface. Emichim, Lu Yute swallowed her saliva. Jojo advanced twice in a day. She's very impressive. I think she's already at the level of a monster. Qi Xianxian expressionlessly rolled her eyes. Although spirit energy gathered from all directions, it was very obvious that it was running out of energy. It couldn't be helped. When she advanced to peak level 14 Great Spiritualist, the little girl had absorbed a lot of spirit energy into her body. Now, it was clearly insufficient. In order to break through the level 15 Great Spiritualist barrier, she couldn't immediately return to Paradise Planet to advance under everyone's watchful eyes. Arbor could only take out the large pile of spirit stones stored in her inner world. She simply sat cross-legged on the spot and spat out spirit stones one by one. Every time the spiritual energy from the spirit stone entered her body, the spirit stone would shatter into powder in her hands. Thus, the group of people directly saw that the large pile of spirit stones that was originally piled up at the little girl's feet was rapidly being destroyed at a speed visible to the naked eye. At the same time, the little stoic set up a spirit-guiding talisman formation with a flick of her finger in order to gather the spiritual energy within a radius of 50 kilometers as quickly as possible, absorbing all the surrounding spiritual energy as much as possible in the shortest time possible. Thus, everyone soon saw a spectacle. The spiritual power within 100 miles surged in the direction of the Wind Thunder City and gathered around the little crown princess, wrapping her in it. The scarred instructor from Tianhua Academy looked at the stoic-faced lady in shock. After a long while, he finally shut his mouth in silence. What kind of outstanding talent was this? The royal school was indeed full of talents. The Tianhua Academy was still too ignorant. He had originally thought that by recruiting such an outstanding batch of students this year, they would be able to compete with the royal school, but in the end things didn't go as planned. The Tianhua Academy was viciously slapped in the face by someone else's child. Although it was painful, he couldn't yell at the top of his lungs, or else it would be even more embarrassing. Chapter 37-29. At this moment, Principal Yun, who had been watching the show for a while, finally walked out from the crowd with a wretched look on his face. He smiled and greeted the scarred teacher. Teacher Shimin, he, how are you? How is it? Our Royal College's students are still considered worthy of your attention, right? The crowd could not help but laugh. Seeing their principal's smug look, no matter how they looked at him, he looked like a villain. The scarred teacher, Shimin Chang, glanced at Principal Yun awkwardly. His two most outstanding freshmen in Tianhua Academy, Yao Rao and Gato, had lost to the Royal College. And they had lost without any suspense. In addition to the female students' loss, they had lost 3 matches in a row. With such strength, challenging the Royal College, it was no wonder that the sly old principal would smile thoughtfully. The strength of the Royal College's students is really not to be underestimated. Teacher Shimin smiled stiffly and said, Shimin Chang and the entire Tianhua Academy are sincerely convinced. Sigh, it's just a spar between students. Principal Yun chuckled as he waved his hand, putting on a face as holy as an expert's. The Tianhua Academy can be considered one of the top academies in the underworld region. It is very normal to have thoughts of moving forward. Yes, of course, with Tianhua Academy's current strength, it is not possible to use our Royal College as a stepping stone and step on our academy. Principal Yun smiled. Even Elder Ku, who was standing beside him, could not help but want to roll his eyes. The principal's villainous look was a little painful to the eyes. It was probably because the principal had been too aggrieved and uncomfortable these few days. Now that he finally had a chance to hold his head high, he quickly grabbed hold of Shimin Chang and ruthlessly ridiculed him. Ahem, ahem. Elder Ku coughed dryly and reminded the principal, Principal, Teacher Shimin is a guest from afar. Ahem, let's be a little more courteous to him. Elder Ku lowered his voice when he said the last sentence, and Yun Piaomiao heard it. Soon after, she let out an "oh" sound, and said with a chuckle, how about this, Instructor Shimin? Everyone must be tired from the competition these few days. Why don't you all follow us back to the academy and have a good rest? No. Unexpectedly, as soon as he said this, he was immediately opposed by the little fatty. Qi Xianxian immediately nodded her head as well. She looked as if she had a common enemy. Of course not. The competition isn't over yet. Didn't we agree that there will be 9 matches plus the team battle? Not a single match less. What a joke, 1 less match would cost 2,000 contribution points. The corners of Dean Yun's eyes twitched, and then he pretended to look regretful. He raised his hand and patted Shimin Chang's shoulder. I'm sorry, Instructor Shimin. The students are very focused on this inter-school competition. Since the students have the intention to fight, we, as deans and teachers, should also fully support them. Shimin Chang nodded speechlessly. Yes, but the arena now, halfway through his words, his eyes suddenly widened like a bull's. At the center of the stage, the little stoic, who was sitting cross-legged, had already finished absorbing all of the surrounding spiritual energy. At this moment, she was sitting upright in midair. Using her feet as the starting point, countless vines drilled out and swept in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it was as if all living things were growing. Chapter 37:30. Everyone lowered their heads to look at their feet, only to see the weeds growing at an insane speed, leaving them speechless. Within minutes, the weeds had grown past the soles of everyone's feet, growing straight towards their calves. It was so fast that it was hair-raising. What an exuberant and terrifying life force. Everyone took a deep breath, and their gazes fell on the ring one after another. Their gazes were somewhat complicated as they looked at it. The little girl's life force was unparalleled, it could be seen how powerful her wood spiritual energy was. Arbor opened his eyes slightly, floating in the air as he slowly landed. In the blink of an eye, he saw his husband moving to his side. Jojo, how do you feel? Mo Lien smiled as he looked at her, sizing her up. He felt that his Jojo's skin was even more lustrous than before, so beautiful that he could not take his eyes off her. It should be due to the endless life force in her body. Now, the little girl did not need to consume anything like the beautifying pill, her life force was enough to maintain her youthful appearance. Lord Jojo raised his little arm and waved it, his expression changing slightly. Very good. She felt that her body was so strong that it could smash a mountain. That guy, who previously needed 10 punches to send him to the edge of the stage, now only needed 1 punch to send him out of the competition. Mo Lien was very happy to hear that. Lowering his head to look at the little girl, he smiled. That's great, let's continue the competition. He winked at her, then looked towards the crowd from Tianhua Academy. Arbor regained his senses and nodded. The contribution points were right in front of him, he had to get them all before he could end the competition. At this moment, Tianhua Academy's Nia Yaorao also walked forward, bowing towards Arbor, expressing her gratitude. Crown Princess, thank you. Just now, at the critical moment, I had nowhere to hide. If it weren't for the Crown Prince Consort controlling those 1,000 sword lights and letting me live, I'm afraid that Yaorao would already be dead by now. Nia Yaorao glanced at Xiaomu gratefully. They had come here to provoke the royal school, so even if they were to die here, there was nothing to say. Because who told you to overestimate yourself and cause trouble? If he died, who could he blame? He could only blame himself for being weak. Arbor faintly swept a glance at Nia Yaorao. This woman's appearance is very enchanting, but her character is relatively calm. No wonder she became the leader of the new student team. It's just a spar. There's no need to put your life on the line. These students from the Tianhua Academy were all gifted. The fact that they had come to challenge the royal school was, in fact, a decision made by the higher-ups of the Tianhua Academy. Sir Jojo had no enmity with these people, so there was no need for him to kill them. He just wanted to scare them a little and earn some contribution points. Nia Yaorao nodded gratefully at Arbor. Thank you very much. Mata jumped onto the ring and said with a smile, Hey, you don't have to thank me. But when we do things, we have to finish what we started, right? So, let's continue with the competition. Nia Yaorao and her team members looked at each other, then turned to see Teacher Shimin nodding at them, so she said, Okay. Mata immediately laughed and summoned a long spear from his conscious. With a boom, he planted it on the ground. Fellow students of the Tianhua Academy, please enlighten me. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.